Okay, well, welcome to another episode of Off the Ranch, where we talk about all things Skinwalker Ranch and everything paranormal related. Today, the interview is with Matthew Roberts, who is an author who has written a book called Initiated, which I have personally found very intense and enlightening. We're going to get into the deep end of the pool here with you, Matthew. I know you've done some other interviews, but I'm hoping we can do something extra special today. All
Okay,
right.
sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I want to start. I've got a couple of things written down I want to make sure everybody is aware of. Number one, this interview is mostly for experiencers. We're going to be talking about psychosis, potentially abductions, a lot of things, metaphysics. So it gets kind of intense at some points, and I just want everyone to know that up front. Also, this is a cult-free experience. Matthew is not a cult leader. He's not trying to get anyone to join a cult. He's not asking for any money. We talk a lot about metaphysics and, organizations and how to live your life potentially based on the context of your experience. But this is not about any kind of a cult. And number three, I want to warn everyone about the hitchhiker effect. After reading this book, and I've shared this book with several other people, I know some other people that you've mentioned to me already that have had some paranormal phenomenon happen to them during reading the book or after reading the book. And I just want everyone to know you could see orbs, you could see a craft, you could have entities in your home, you could see the dark shadow figures at night, you could have electronic disturbances. So just be aware of that and don't blame us.
That's right.
All right. So, Matthew, why don't you start by telling us your background, who you are?
Yeah, so I was a cryptologist in the Navy. Um, I was on the Theodore Roosevelt for the Gimbal event, the Gimbal footage that everyone's familiar with. The Gimbal and the Go Fast footage were both from that event.
What year was
Um,
that?
that was 2015.
So you were on the boat when that happened.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was stationed there. We were doing workups. Um, and after that, I transferred to the Office of Naval Intelligence, where I was an analyst for 3 years. And then I left the Navy in 2020, March of 2020.
Okay. Now, had you had any paranormal experiences before the gimbal experience in 2015 while you were on the boat?
I didn't think so. Um, at that point, I didn't think so. Right? It wasn't something that I ever really thought about. I didn't think about the paranormal. I didn't think about aliens. I wasn't religious or spiritual in any way. I
Would,
was
would
very much hard science based
okay.
type
Would you have
thinking.
classified yourself as an atheist?
Yes, I was a devout atheist. I did not believe in any of that. I thought it's all nonsense. There's nothing to it. Um, I just
Okay,
had no room for that in my life whatsoever.
so you're on the aircraft carrier in 2015, the Roosevelt. You're a
Hmm.
hardcore atheist.
Yeah.
Don't really have any interest or knowledge or interest in the paranormal at all. You're pretty much
Hmm.
solidly grounded, and you're cryptologist
Yeah.
on the ship. Okay. And so you learn about, can you just tell us a little bit about what you mentioned in your book about how you found out about what the gimbal video on the ship and how it
Yeah.
impacted you?
Yeah, so we had just finished our workups. There were some things that had happened during that workup cycle that were a bit unusual, but I didn't I kind of brushed it off. And then we had finished, right? So we're sitting back waiting for our grade. Uh and then a buddy of mine who works more closely with the air wing came into my shop and he says, "Hey, check this out." And he tells me where to find the files. So I log in and I watched the videos. We were all kind of like gathered around the computer and we're like, What's this guy talking about?" Right? And so we all just kind of watched the gimbal and the Go Fast footage for the first time in 2015. Um, and the night before I had heard I was getting ready for bed, and I had heard that we were launching alerts, which is just like a jet, right? We were launching a jet to go check something out. And I thought that was strange. I was like, we finished the air defense exercise. I'm not sure why we're still launching jets. I didn't really see a reason for that. So I thought maybe it's this real world. And I called up to the shop and I said, "Do I need to come up there?" And they were like, "No, no, it's okay." And that's of course, this whole the gimbal and the Go Fast footage, these weren't just like one-off. This happened one night for an hour or something. This was an ongoing thing that lasted several days.
Wow. So I'm assuming you saw a higher resolution version of the video, not the same one we saw in 2017 on the news, on the national news.
No, actually, the clip that has been released is exactly the same clip I
Okay.
saw on the
Did you
ship.
see any other data? I know you can't talk about it, but I mean, how did you know it was legitimate and not some kind of a
Um,
psyop?
right. I don't really know if I can get into that. Um,
Okay. But I'm assuming you saw other data that, I mean, you knew it was
yeah,
reality.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What was that aha moment like for you?
Well, I mean, sitting there watching it for the first time, obviously, we're in a skiff, right? Which is a sensitive compartmented information facility where all kinds of classified information is kept, where we have access to all kinds of classified information, top secret on down to confidential. I had access to it. So, um, to be watching this in that environment, you knew it wasn't a joke. You took it seriously. You knew it was serious. So, um,
So your first impression when you first saw it was an immediate gut reaction, "Oh my God, this is real," or was it, "What the fuck is that?" What was
yeah,
your
I mean,
thought process? Because this is sort of your beginning of your initiation. You're going from a
yeah.
non-experiencer to an
Hmm.
experiencer. It's the same thing we go through when we see a craft in the air or an orb. And
Hmm.
there's that moment where you kind of snap psychologically. What was
Yeah,
that like? Was it instantaneous or did you have to like watch it? And were you obsessed with it? Quite often people
yeah,
are obsessed and they just want to keep watching it and it just gets deeper and deeper. And they sleep dream about it.
yeah. I was obsessed with the footage. I mean, I found myself watching it over and over and over again, because I couldn't really make sense of it, and it was kind of immediately disturbing on some level because it's like, okay, so I guess this stuff is real, this UFO stuff. Um, but there was stuff out there about abductions and stuff like that, and I was like, well, okay, so this stuff is real, but how much of it is real? And I didn't know what the truth of that was. And so, and at the end of the day, I really did feel kind of creepy about it, honestly. I I throughout the next several days, I got this creepy kind of feeling that, they were there for me and that someone was going to find that out and that was not going to be good for me.
What do you mean they were there for you? You mean
I,
they knew that you knew? See, I saw a craft, and
yeah,
when I saw the craft, I realized the craft sees me.
yeah.
That
And that's kind
it's a
of
two-way. It's like you pair with them like a Bluetooth pairing.
right. And that's kind of the feeling that I had. But at the time I was like, well, that's just ridiculous. I'm inside the ship. I wasn't in one of these aircraft that went out to go take a look at it, so how would it know that I am here, right? But I did have that feeling and it was a gut feeling and I can't I couldn't explain it at the time, and I just thought it was ridiculous, so I put it out of my head, and I
Hmm.
just thought that's just the dumbest thing that has ever occurred to me before. Um, but it was very real to me at the time, and I was very paranoid about that. Um, and like I said, at the time, I didn't understand that, but it became kind of apparent a few years later.
How much were you influenced in that moment by the reaction of others? Was this a social phenomenon where people were also kind of losing their shit and it sort of impacted you as well? Or
No,
did you feel like the odd man out?
I was very much the odd man out, because I felt I found myself. So after the workups, we went on deployment, right? And I know that there were a couple of people who were kind of interested in it and thought it was strange, but um, so I found myself throughout the deployment, I would pull it up once in a while and take a look at it, and I'm just like, geez, this is like the most incredible thing I've ever seen, you know?
Yeah. But were other people doing that too? I mean,
No,
did you like commune with other people? So this was
no.
this was a very personal individual thing. This wasn't a group initiation.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I was watching this stuff in my shop, and at one point, I remember, I was kind of the lead in the shop, and so some of my guys walked in one day while I was watching it, and they walked past me. They saw what was on my screen, and they were like, "Are you watching that again? Like, what are you doing?" And they just kind of walked past, shaking their head, and I just was like, "How do you not think this is the most incredible thing you've ever seen?" You know?
Did
We
did
we all knew what it was, right? I
did they
mean,
just not think it was real, or did you think it just kind of bounced off them?
I think it just kind of bounced off them. I don't think that they doubted it, right? They didn't doubt what it was. They just weren't interested, which I thought that was strange, their reaction to it. But, I mean, as I dug into this years later, I found out that, this is kind of a common reaction that people either respond to it a lot or they don't respond to it at all, right? It's like pretty much one or the other. There's like no, there's no in between. It seems. So
So did you feel you were chosen or targeted?
yeah, I would say targeted is kind of the way I felt. Singled out, you know.
Yeah. Now you've got a cryptography background. I would say you're an expert in cryptography. Did your knowledge of cryptography, do you feel like that played into this at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Later it did, you
Okay.
know. Yeah, when I was trying to figure it all out, I mean, obviously my training there and my training as an analyst kind of um, helped me with that a great deal, I think.
What did you think when it was actually released in 2017, December?
Oh, I felt sick, you know. I did.
Really?
Yeah. Um, my brother, I didn't see the New York Times article initially, and then, my brother one day texted me and he said, "Oh, there's this article in the New York Times. You should check it out." And there's video. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll check it out, So, I read the article and I watched the video and I was like, "Oh my God, this is the same footage I saw back in 2015." Um, and you never it's just working in, a classified environment as I had for 16 years, right? It's not common that you're dealing with something behind closed doors and then it sees the light of day, right? Um, I mean, sometimes there are events that are very big, right? Newsworthy events that you'll be working some situation and then, 10 minutes later you see that coming across the tape on Al Jazeera at the bottom or something like breaking news.
Yeah.
We're just getting this in, So that was a common occurrence, but something like this, I certainly never thought I would see it again.
So you
right?
didn't think it was going to make the light of day.
No, no, not at all, right? Because I mean, knowing that this is real now, right? And then knowing that it's denied. Um, at the time, in 2015, I thought to myself, well, obviously there must be some program for this. I'm not read into it, which is why I've never seen anything like this before. And so since I'm not read into it, I'll never know, right? So I just put it in the back of my head and I didn't really I didn't really think about it. Um, although, you know, when I did get to O and I was going through um my kind of onboarding and orientation, uh I did I did inquire about that a little bit, right? And the people I asked were just like, "Oh, I don't know anything about that." You know, so so that seemed to be kind of like another dead end. So I just, tried to forget about it.
In 2015, did you know that it wasn't an isolated incident, or did you think it was like a one-off? Or
Well,
did
in
you know
20
that it was a pattern of other?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the pattern in 2015 at all. I wasn't, kind of aware of that until much later, obviously.
So based on your experience and your knowledge, what would you say to skeptics, people like Mick West, who are constantly saying this was a balloon or was another jet? And they've got all these arguments and they do these diagrams and these videos in their backyards, parallax and all that.
Yeah.
How would you respond to the pseudo skeptics that basically claim that they've debunked the gimbal?
Well, I mean, they haven't debunked anything, right? So all they've proven, all Mick West has proven or thinks he's proven, is that some of the rotation may be due to the rotating of the pod. Okay. So what is it? You know? And I will say that he's got a lot of people fooled into believing him, unfortunately, because I think he claims that it's some jet, right? It's some distant jet. And you got to understand um, that that is not possible. It's not possible, number one, because this event was over the course of several days, right? This just wasn't one time, one night, right?
Mhm.
Um, so when we launch jets to go check something out, it's because we don't know what it is, right? We have a radar contact. It's around the ship. It shouldn't be, right? And so there have been attempts to hail this on international hailing frequencies. There have been attempts to identify it through what we call IFF, identify friend or foe, which is something that it's a transmitter, right? And it's on board all ships and boats, uh, all aircraft, and it basically transmits I am whatever, British Airways flight 123, right? And so it's easily identifiable. That would have been switched off on this, right? In that we had an air contact and it wasn't emitting IFF, wasn't answering hails on the international hailing frequency, which is mandatory that they monitor this frequency, right? This is international law. So it was unusual in that obviously it's not answering these hails. It's not emitting these things. So it's in violation of international law at that point. And it's near a US warship. So it becomes a very big deal. You better figure out what this thing is, right? Because in a post 9/11 world, the question becomes, well, is this an airliner and has it been hijacked? So this escalates very quickly, you know, and it's taken extremely seriously. We're talking because an aircraft carrier, it's an asset worth billions of dollars, right? And we're not going to just risk that. We're not going to say, oh, well, we've got this unidentified, shut off the lights and go to bed, forget about it. It does not work that way, right? So we send up these jets. We sent up more than one. It was more than just one jet one day, right? Um, and so it's a little ridiculous that because when you send up a jet, obviously this jet is going to get close to it to try and figure out what the hell's going on. Is this an aircraft? Has it been hijacked? Is it headed for New York? Is it headed for the Pentagon again? Um, so it's a really, really big deal. There's no so if you're a pilot, right, and the admiral has sent you up there to figure out what this is, and you come back and you're like, I don't know. The admiral is going to be like, what do you mean you don't know? What is it? What is this thing?
Yeah.
What is going on? And that to say I don't know is not good enough, right? So there's going to be more eyes on this because of that. So for Mick West to tell everybody that we're just like a bunch of, you know, uh, Barney Fifes out there and we don't know which way is up and we couldn't find our way out of a brown paper bag is ridiculous. We can put a warhead on the head of a pin, you know, but he would have you believe that we sent up jets to go check this thing out and that we just totally misidentified it for 4 nights in a row and we don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
right? And so the whole thing, his whole argument is just absolutely ludicrous.
Okay. What about Joe Rogan, who suspects that it may just be a top secret project and they intentionally fly near an aircraft carrier to basically test your response and your ability to identify it? But it's actually, you know what I'm saying?
Right. That doesn't happen. I can tell you that doesn't happen, right? There's no way you're not going to put um and I realize what they're saying. Tests like this do happen, right? But when they do happen, people know that it's going to be happening. I've been a part of tests like this, right?
Okay.
Where we're testing something, right? And so everyone is aware. They'll say you're going to see X, Y, and Z. Don't worry about it. This is a test. We're testing this new equipment, or we're testing some new aircraft, or something like that. And you have people on board that are there for the event, right? And everybody knows who they are. So so to say that this was just like that they decided that they would test this thing and not tell anyone about it is not right, because I'll tell you what. So and this is how you can tell that that is not what happened. When we were on station in the Gulf, right, my friend who works with the air wing, I was passing him one day. I was just busy as hell. I mean, on deployment. Sometimes I would sleep like every other day. It was it was
Wow.
ridiculous, right? So I was headed down we call it a P way, the hallway, one of the hallways on the ship towards, I think it was going into Civic. Uh, and I just had bundles of stuff, classified material or whatever. And as I passed him, he tells me they're back, like the Poltergeist movie. And I as I passed him, I was like, wait, what's he talking about? And then I was like, oh, he's talking about that. And I thought to myself, no way, no way, And then I was like, are you sure? And he said, mm-hmm. And then we were kind of passing in the night, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. But here's the thing about testing equipment that's still in the testing phase, right? So you're talking about a possible craft that is worth billions of dollars at this point, right? Because it's like the only one that's being tested. And this program, we've spent billions of dollars to get it to this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to put that asset into a situation where it is in front of aircraft that are armed, right? At this point, they're armed taking off the deck. They're loaded with missiles. They've got bullets on board. They can shoot this thing down, right? And if a pilot panics, um, it's going to be a bad day, and you've just lost your billion-dollar asset. Um, and so that just there's deconfliction for that. That just does not happen that way. It doesn't happen that way at all.
After 3 days, why didn't they fire on it?
Uh, well, I don't know if I can get into that, but you know, I don't think that there was because of it's just I think the rules of engagement probably just didn't permit it at the time. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't answer that.
What about the Chinese? We got the Chinese balloon, right? That was
Yeah.
flying over America. Could it be some kind of Chinese tech?
No. Mm-mm. Nope. I mean,
Wow.
I
Okay,
mean,
so
I don't really know what to say. I mean, no.
I just want to get all that out of the way to make it very clear that you
Yeah.
had a you had that aha moment where you're like,
Yeah.
this is real. Now we have people that watch Skinwalker Ranch, the series, and as hooky as that show is, people will watch it, and 3 or 4 episodes into it, or 2 or 3 seasons into it, at some point they snap and they realize, they turn to their spouse or their friend and they say, there's something to this.
Yeah.
There's
Hmm.
something real here. And
Yeah.
that's when the hitchhikers show up. That's when their journey sort of starts. So in your book, you sort of describe this gimbal experience you had as sort of the kickoff,
Hmm.
and it basically just sort of opens up what happens next. So you start basically going down the roller coaster. So what happened next after you had this gimbal experience? What was your next experience with the phenomenon?
Well, my next experience with the phenomenon was in what was it, 2017? It's probably about 2017. I was at O&I, the Office of Naval Intelligence. I was working as an analyst. And I started to have well, so the next thing that happened though was when before I started to have these things was the New York Times article hit, right?
Okay. Okay,
Right.
yep.
So the New York Times article hits, and then I see the footage and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all out there. Um, and I never talked to my family about anything that I did or anything that I was involved in or had known about. Um, and so my brother was going to be calling me about this, and I was not comfortable talking about it just because, uh, I was there obviously when this footage was collected, and and it wasn't something I never discussed my job, right?
Right.
My family had no idea what I do. In fact, my dad asked me one day about something that he thought was totally unrelated. It was like a highly technical question, and I was just kind of able to answer it, off the cuff. And he was like a little taken aback by that. And he was like, wait, how do you know that? And he's like, what exactly do you do all day? And I was like, well, I kind of changed the subject and moved on. But so I wasn't comfortable talking about this stuff. But, the New York Times article and then the fact that, there were people mention like Chris Mellon, he was a bigwig at the Pentagon. I mean, so he's talking about it and he's a member of this organization to the Stars Academy that's listed here in the article. I guess maybe I can go ahead and talk about it. So, when my brother called me and asked about it, I kind of choked a little bit and I said, yeah, this is real. I was there when this particular footage was collected. So, you know, there was that. And so, being an analyst, I thought, well, if I'm not read into this, I can, there's a certain amount of information that's going to be out there in the public about it. So I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and just drill down on this organization, see if any of these people have written books. And that's where I'll start to find more answers. So I started reading, Tom DeLonge's books, which then kind of led me to Jacques Vallée because he wrote the foreword to one of those books. And so I was like, wow, there's a lot more to this. And I wasn't really taking it seriously before, but clearly there's something here, you know. And so I just wanted to know more. But then at some point I reached like the end of what I viewed to be credible sources of information. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to just wait for the government to release more information. And who knows when that's going to happen, right? So, so I wasn't really satisfied with that. And I remember, there was kind of a cliffhanger in one of Tom DeLonge's books, and he's talking about these tablets, ancient tablets or whatever. And I was like, well, what's he getting at here? What are these ancient tablets? So I started to look into that. I think I Googled like ancient tablets or something. First thing that came up was, 10 Commandments. And I was like, oh gosh, being an atheist, I was like, okay, that's whatever. That's not it. That's not what he's talking about here. But then I came across the Emerald tablets, which was kind of which mentions like Hermetic teachings and stuff like that. And was like, well, what is Hermeticism? And I kind of looked it up and I found this book, The Cabalian. I read the synopsis of it and I was like, oh, this sounds so ridiculous. I'm not even gonna look at this book, this is not something I would ever read, you know. Um, and so I went to bed that night thinking, well, okay, that's it. I'm not going any further down this rabbit hole because who knows where it goes. And I'm not really finding anything that I deem to be real, right? Um, I'm coming across ridiculous books like the Cabalian, right?
Right.
So, and it said, that there's no such thing as coincidence. Everything happens for a reason. That was kind of the synopsis, and it gives these 7 universal principles that govern the universe. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Hocus pocus, you know. So I went to bed that night and I was like, that's it. All right. I'm just going to wait for the government then to tell me what this is. Um, and of course, that's when some really scary things started to happen. Yeah.
Right. Now, before we get into that, let's go back to the Cabalian for a minute.
Hmm.
Basically, the premise behind that is there are no coincidences.
Right.
And this is all a series of synchronicities.
Hmm.
And the definition of synchronicity is a highly unlikely coincidence that is profoundly meaningful.
Yeah.
Right. A small example is if you're thinking about someone out of the blue and then you bump into them,
Hmm.
an
Right.
hour later or the next day, right?
Or they call you or something.
Or they call you,
Yeah.
right? And they can get to the point where, I mean, I don't want to get into examples right now, but it's basically you enter the realm of the world of synchronicities as soon as you realize that they're real. The first step
Yeah.
in that is you've got to know that synchronicities are real and what they are.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is you start looking for synchronicities in your life. And
Hmm.
just by knowing what they are and looking for them, it basically invites them into your life, or at least you start to recognize them. They're probably there all the time, right?
Yeah. I would assume so. And you chalk it up to coincidence and you say, oh, that's kind of a neat little coincidence, but I'm not going to think any further than that about it,
Right.
and
So
that's what most people do. They
right.
dismiss.
But so you're saying that night something happened.
No, it was the next day.
Oh, the
That
next day.
Yeah, the next day, the very next day, um, things picked up and they got very, very scary. I was certainly just scared out of my mind after the events of that day.
Now, is that when you died?
No, this
Okay.
had actually already happened.
You'd already died.
Yeah, I had a medical condition, um, and I was in the ICU for a little while, and so that had already happened prior to this, just prior to it.
Prior to, so I want to get the timeline right.
Right,
2015 Gimbal, 2017, it goes public.
right,
And then in
and
2018, you die?
no, so yeah, well, it was just before the New York Times article came out is when
Okay.
I was in the ICU, and I was actually at home for a little while recuperating after being they call it convalescing, right? Where
Mhm.
I was just I had come home from the hospital and I had the next couple of weeks where I was just, you know, sitting at home resting.
Okay. So what happened the next day after you read the Cabalian?
Right. So, well, actually, that plays into it because I had to drive down to Pax River, that day, the following day, to because my medical review board stuff had come back, and I had to sign some paperwork for it, for the incident that I had, right? Because they were going to decide whether or not I could stay in the Navy, based on the severity of what had happened to me, right? So they were either gonna, medically discharge me or they were gonna find me fit for duty. Um, and so I had to drive down to Pax River and sign some paperwork. They had found that I could was fit for duty. I could stay in, but I could never deploy again. Um, but that wasn't really a problem because I was at the end of my career and I wasn't scheduled. So at that point in my career, I wouldn't have been scheduled to go out on another ship necessarily. I could go overseas shore duty and that would have been the same thing and it wouldn't have been a big deal. That's why they found me fit for duty, but with restrictions, right? I could never deploy. I couldn't go on a ship again.
Mhm.
Uh, but it being the end of my career, um that wasn't really a problem. I had spent more than a decade on ships at this point in my career, so I had put in my time out to sea, and I think the board saw that and they were okay with it. So anyway, I'm driving down there. Everything's normal, right? I sign my paperwork, I'll stay in, um, because I only had 4 years left, right? Until I retired, which would have just been one more rotation.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm driving back, um, and I had resigned myself to the fact that, I wasn't going to find any more kind of credible information about this. I looked the night before when I was looking at the Cabalian, I looked up MUFON to see if there was maybe a local chapter, and I wasn't seeing anything. Um, and I didn't really I being in Intel, I never did social media at all, ever. Like I just didn't touch it. I didn't think it was wise. So I was not a social media person. Um, so anyway, I'm driving back to DC after this board and I signed my paperwork. And this car kind of zooms up next to me and cuts me off, right? And on the back of the car is a giant sticker that says MUFON Maryland, find us on Facebook. And I was like, oh, well, that's why I didn't see anything about them because I don't do Facebook, right? So that wasn't someplace that I looked for information on MUFON, right? And I thought, well, maybe this guy's gonna pull over at the next gas station. I can talk to him a little bit. But but then I thought, I'm in uniform. That wouldn't be a good idea. He'd probably think I'm some kind of weirdo. So I decided that I would just wait, and not talk to this guy. So he kind of sped off down the road, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And then I noticed I was passing this Hobby Lobby on the right, on it was just off the freeway. And I thought, oh, I've never actually seen a Hobby Lobby before, but I was aware of like this Supreme Court decision that had come down where they allowed kind of corporations or people to type stuff. And Hobby Lobby was a part of that. And so I was aware of all of that. And I kind of made a mental note of it. And then, I get home after work, and I'm kind of just doing laundry, going about my day. Then in the evening, you know, I was a smoker, so I went out for a cigarette and I thought, well, I'm gonna go to bed now. It's getting kind of late. Got to go to work tomorrow. Um, and so I come back in from that and I had to go through the living room, and my roommate was sitting there watching TV. And he was, he's kind of a liberal guy, so he was watching, I think, CNN or MSNBC, the talking heads. And as I'm about to head up the stairs, he says, "You know what's wrong with the Republicans?" And I said, "No, what?" And he said, "Hobby Lobby." He was like, "That Supreme Court decision, allowed all this dirty money into campaigns." And so I kind of talked to him about that for a few minutes. And then I went upstairs and I thought, well, that's kind of a day of coincidences, like I was looking up um MUFON, and that guy cut me off, and just as he cut me off, I was passing a Hobby Lobby and my roommate just brought that up, and it was kind of a day of coincidences, right? So I thought, okay, well, that's kind of weird. And so I closed the door, and then I started to just feel very, very uncomfortable, right? My heart started pounding, right? And I felt like this urge to get in my car and drive. And it was creeping me out a little bit, right? Because I had read in like some of Jacques Vallée's stuff that people feel an urge to drive or something.
Yep.
And,
Get in their car and
and,
just go
yeah. And so
without knowing where they're going. They just go.
right. Yeah. And that was exactly what I was feeling. And I thought, well, that's just stupid. Right. And so I was like, well, I'll go get in the car and see where this goes. Right.
Do it anyway.
Yeah. So I back out into like the 3-point turn to get out of the driveway, and I stopped and I thought, you know what? This is insane. This is ridiculous. I was like, it's getting late. I got to work tomorrow, and I've been reading these creepy books, and this is just nonsense.
And
I'm
where are
gonna
you
I'm gonna
going?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't even know where I'm going. So I said, I am just, but this feeling to go drive was like powerful. It was like it would not leave me, you know? And I thought, well, I'm gonna pull back into my parking spot and I'm gonna go to bed. This is insane. Right? I thought if I keep this up, I'm gonna be in a straitjacket if I keep going on these wild goose chases.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just gonna pull back in and forget this whole thing. And as soon as I thought that, I got like this really uncomfortable. I can only describe it as like it felt like electric shock, right? Because I have rental properties, and I work on all of my own stuff, outlets, whatever, rewiring. I can do all that. And when you touch a live electrical wire, you feel that kind of buzzing.
Hmm.
That's what my whole body felt like. And I had like stepped on the gas during that and turned the steering wheel towards the road, and I had not done that, right? That was not me. Um, and so you know, at this point, I as soon as that happened, it shut off, right? And I'm drifting towards the road, and I slammed on the brakes, and I was just like hyperventilating, panicking at this point, right? Because it's like, what is that, right? I have never been able to induce the feeling of electric shock in myself before. I was like, I know this is not me, right? This is real now.
And it's external.
Yeah. And so, I was like, okay, fine. I'm going, wherever I am going. I don't know. I just didn't want to get shocked again. It was such an odd feeling. Like I could feel it in my toenail beds. Um, they felt like very raw and exposed in my shoes. I don't know what that was. It must have been some kind of electricity, but so anyway, I was like, okay, fine, I'm going. And I'm in full panic mode at this point because it's like now I know that A, something is watching me, B, it has the power to like induce this thing where it can take control of me, and so that is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I start down the road, and I thought, well, I'll drive back down to Pax River because that's where I was, and it's like there's nothing there, right, between DC and Pax River. It's like you'll see a farm here or a farm there. It's very sparsely populated. Um, so I thought, well, I'll drive back down that way, and so just before the freeway, there was this gas station, and I pulled in there, and I went to grab my wallet off the seat, because I figure I'm gonna grab a soda. Like I'm a Mountain Dew guy. I love Mountain Dew, so I'm just gonna grab a Mountain Dew for the road. I was like, I don't know where I'm going, how long this is gonna take, but I should have a drink. So as I'm sitting there, the feeling washed over me that, whatever I was meant to leave the house for was gonna happen right here at this gas station. So I'm like super paranoid now because it's like not only can it control me and it's watching, but whatever it is also knows what's going to happen, right? And that, you know, being an atheist, coming from that background, this is just it's too much, right? It's almost too much. So I'm panicking. I don't know what is going on, and so I'm scanning the store. I'm like, what's going to happen here? I don't even know. And then I see this event that's clearly out of place, right? There's this homeless man in front of this gas station at midnight near the freeway in like a bad part of town, right? And he's sitting with these two women who were like dressed to the nines in professional business attire. They look like some of the women that I worked with at O&I that were maybe about to go brief Congress or something.
Mm-hmm.
They were very well put together. And they're sitting with a homeless man that's filthy. He's got like grass in his hair, and I was like, this isn't right, you know, at midnight near the freeway at a gas station. So I was like, I'm supposed to hear what they're talking about. Something told me this. I just was feeling this, and I was like afraid to get out of the car, right? And then I hear this booming voice in my head that says, "Get out," right?
A voice, male or
Yeah,
female?
male. And it just said, "Get out," right? Like, because I'm like sitting there afraid, right? I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to get out. I don't want to hear what they're saying. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get out and I'm just gonna walk past them and see what happens. Um, so I get out and I'm walking across the parking lot, and I am in such a panic. I'm a mess. I've been crying because I don't understand what's happening here, right? So my legs are like wet noodles, and and I don't know what's gonna happen. And so as I'm walking past them, one of the women holds up her hand and she's pointing at the homeless man. She said, "You see?" She said, "There's no such thing as coincidence. Everything happens for a reason." She said, I never sit at places like this, but something told me to sit here tonight. And I walked in the store and I started thinking about the coincidences of the day, and I was like, no way did that lady just say that.
And the
No
Cabalian,
fucking
right?
way. Yes, right. And I thought that's what that book said from
Yeah.
last night. And so I am going to be reading this book tomorrow, you know? And I was like, this is going to have to be it for tonight because I don't think I can handle anything else, you know? Because this was like it was coming from like the background that I did and not believing in any of this stuff and thinking that it was all just, you know, nonsense to now it's just smacked me in the face like a shovel, right? And said, "No, this is real." Uh and it was very scary.
What's taking control of your body? You probably feel like a mannequin. It's pulling strings.
Right, yeah.
It's yeah. So
And
what happened?
so
Yeah, what happened
So,
next?
it's just like you come to this realization that my entire day here was orchestrated, right? From the MUFON guy that kind of cut me off earlier in the day to my roommate mentioning the Hobby Lobby, and I had seen that, and so it was like now I'm aware that there was something that was watching me all day and like pulling strings, right? Um, and that was very uncomfortable, incredibly uncomfortable. Um, I can't even describe it.
Terrifying?
Yes,
Overwhelming?
yeah,
Overwhelming?
all of the above. It
And
was
you
just
don't know what's going to happen next.
right. I was terrified.
Hmm.
I was absolutely terrified after that. And so I read this book the next day, um, the Cabalian, and I was kind of blown away. It was just like it was talking about no such thing as coincidence. Everything's happens for reason. And at one point, it talks about how, when you're ready, then this little book will come to you. And reading that, it was like the hair on the back of my neck just stood up, and the hair on my arms stood up. I was like, what the hell does that even mean? What what is going on here, right? This is crazy. So yeah, it was, and I thought, I after that I read it several times. I read the book several times and I thought, this is obviously I'm maybe going to be learning something here and I should probably pay attention. Um, I hadn't seen an entity at that point. I didn't think, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
so I thought, well, okay, if I'm going to be taught some things and this is about learning, as the Cabalian suggests, then um, I'm ready. Teach me whatever. Um, I'm ready for it. Of course, nothing could have been farther from the truth in that. Um, but that's what I thought at the time.
What happened next?
Well, that was when I started to have things showing up in my room. Uh, and that was, I had never, you hear about these kind of things. Jacques Vallée writes about them, but you never really expect that that's going to be the case for you. So when that did happen, it's obviously very shocking. Um, just as shocking, if not more so, than um, reading that book and having those coincidences. But it was just very odd to think that, here is this book, and it's connected to them in some way, right? And it's telling me these things, and I'm having these experiences. And how the hell is this guy who wrote this? How does he know this? Right? It was such a mystery to me. I mean, the Cabalian was written what, like 1908, I think. Um, and it was written by a guy named William Walker Atkinson, and so I thought, well, he's obviously written some other things. I should probably look into that, right? Because whatever's happening to me is very profound. I didn't know
Hmm.
what it was or what the end goal was, but I knew that something was happening, something big, right? And so I had started actually journaling my experiences, which later helped me write the book. So um, I wanted to have something. I didn't know I was going to write a book on this, obviously, but I wanted to have something that I could look back on and say, well, just try to put it together, right? I needed something. So I started reading other books by Atkinson, and in one of the books, he's singing the praises of this woman named Mabel Collins, who was an English school teacher, um, and she wrote some books. Light on the Path was one of them, and I read that. Um, Another one was Our Glorious Future. I read that one. I didn't really fully understand any of these things at the time that I read them, but I put it together obviously later. I
Hmm.
kind of put things together. Um, but it was nuts. It got really nuts.
Yeah.
Uh,
So let's go into the nuts.
okay.
Uh, you said that things came to you in your room.
Yeah.
Was this while you're reading these books? And
Yes.
what were the
Mhm.
things?
Well, so like the first thing that happened was, I think it was like a few nights later after I was like, well, okay, I'm ready for more. Show me more then if I'm gonna learn. And and I wake up in my room and this is something that they played on the docu-series, right? Because I talked about this.
Let's talk about what the docuseries is called Encounters,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
on Netflix.
right.
And which
Yeah.
episode are you in?
I'm in the first episode, but they that you know, I think it was somebody had dropped a like like a 15-minute long video of me talking about, I think in particular, this encounter. In when they released the Netflix series, they dropped that. Um, and so separately, right? And I think so there's that. So that is out there. But what happened was I'm in my bed, right? I'm asleep one night, and I felt something grab my arm, kind of right here. And I kind of opened my eyes, and I'm looking at my window to the left as I'm opening my eyes in my room, and all of a sudden, like, my eyes start to go blurry a little bit. Everything starts to get blurry, and so I went to go, kind of rub the sleep out of my eyes, and when I tried to do that, I realized I can't move, right? I can't wipe the sleep out of my eyes. I can't move. And so I thought, oh, well, I woke up because something grabbed my arm and I can feel that it's still there, right? It's still grabbing my arm. And so even though I couldn't move, kind of fight to turn my head to the right. And I see this, by the time my head is to the right, like everything is out of focus. And I can see this dark figure, like a shadow person, a head, a torso, two arms, kind of standing over me, right? But it's all black. I can't really see.
Mhm.
So as I'm watching this, I think to myself, I should be terrified because there's someone in my room right now, but I'm not really terrified, you know. I don't know why. But as I'm thinking about this, like all of a sudden behind this entity, my room starts to light up in this like just golden light, right? And it gets so bright that it's like blinding. And then it the light just concentrates into these like rays of golden light coming out of its head. Um, and I thought to myself, what the fuck is going on? Right? Uh, and then I kind of drift off to sleep and I started to have this sexual dream of me and my ex from years ago, 20 years ago, actually. And and then I'm waking up in my room again, and I can see that there's this person on top of me, woman. She has blue skin. And my hands are on her thighs, and I can feel her skin doesn't feel like normal human skin, right? It's kind of thicker and tighter than normal human skin would be. And I kind of scan up to, and I'm still feeling paralyzed at this point. And so I scan up to try and get a look at her face, but it's blur. Her face is blurry, but the rest of her I can see, right?
Now, is she naked? Does she have breasts? What
Yeah, well,
what's
she
going on here?
does.
She's
She
she's
does,
she's
but
straddling
she's
you, right?
right, yeah, and she's got like this tube top on that appears to be like almost metallic. It's got like a red and silver kind of zigzag vertical pattern on it, and it almost looked like it was made out of like precious metals like silver and ruby or something, and that they were like these just impossibly tiny beads. It looked very, I don't even know how I would describe that. It's just it looked very unusual. Um so this happened several times. I'm in and out of this dream state, and then I wake up in my room the next morning, um, and I was just like, what happened last night? You know?
So let's be clear. This was a sexual encounter.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not
for
not
sure.
necessarily an abduction, but would you classify it as rape?
I did at the time, right?
You felt
I
violated?
I did, of course. I woke up and I felt disgusting. I felt I wanted to throw up. I wanted to uh punch a hole in the wall. I wanted to just I was not okay with it, right? And I'm just I even I went down to have a cigarette that morning, and I'm kind of confused, and I'm like, okay, I wanted to understand, right? And this is what I got. And this can't happen, right? This is too much. This You can't do this to people, right? Um and so I'm like dry heaving, like I'm wanting to vomit, but obviously it's early in the morning. I haven't eaten anything or had anything to drink yet. And I'm trying to smoke my cigarette, and I'm thinking about all this, and I thought, I was like, wait a minute. That whole light show, that looks like all the religious art I've seen all over the world, right? Being a sailor, I've been everywhere and all over the world. And so you go into cathedrals, you go into churches, you see religious things all over the place, and it looked like religious art, right? You always see like the deity or um Jesus, and they've got like rays of light coming out of the head, or they're illuminated from behind.
Hmm.
And that is typical in every piece of religious art I've ever seen with a person in it, right? And so I thought, well, I'm not the first one to see this, right? This has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, why? Like, what is that? What does that mean? And so at that point, you know, I was in a panic for a couple of weeks, but then these things started to occur to me. And I thought, there's something I'm missing here. Something's not right. right? Because this can't be. This has been going on forever. And there's this associated light show. People have seen it before. There's a deeper meaning here, and I need to just kind of step back and reserve judgment on this until I understand what's going on, right? Because clearly there's more going on here than I understand. Um, so that was that. After several weeks of panic, that's kind of where I arrived. Um, and that's not to say that I was okay with it at that point, but I was just like, there's more to this, and I need to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's where I was.
Wow. What you're really describing is the title of the book. You were being
Yeah.
initiated.
Right. Yeah, and I had no, and the Cabalian was written by the three initiates, right? But that wasn't something that occurred to me at this stage of the game, right? And so I started to get into these other books by Mabel Collins, Light on the Path, and they're talking about this process. And I'm just like, this is a process for something? I wasn't really getting it. So I decided that I would just focus all of my attention on this because it's clearly very important. Um, and I don't know, I feel like a lot of experiencers don't really do this, but I kind of looked at this and I thought, well, there's all these theories out there, right? They come down here and they're feeding off of our emotions or
Yeah.
something like that. And I went through those kind of things one by one and I kind of ticked them off as I came to the conclusion that, well, that's not possible. This isn't possible. So what is this? You know what I mean? Because it occurred to me one of the big things out there is that people say, oh, they're feeding off of our negative emotions, right?
Loosh, Prison Planet, Loosh,
Right, yeah, right.
which is just,
And I started to think about that and I thought, that's really kind of an evolutionary impossibility when you think about it. Because if you're an entity that feeds off of negative emotions, you're going to induce those emotions in your fellow beings to feed off of that as well. And so that kind of chaos isn't really conducive to getting a society to the point that they can evolve in such a way that they can have these craft that take them anywhere they want to be as fast as they want to get there. It just, those two things just could not happen, evolutionarily speaking,
right,
together.
right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. At the same time, though, especially in our modern society, there's a lot of people, experiencers, non-experiencers, that feel like the misery and the suffering in their lives is somehow benefiting other people. And I think that's where this, people think they're in a matrix. They feel like
Mhm,
all their suffering is sort of induced and someone's enjoying it. And
mhm.
I think the answer is it's other humans.
Oh yeah, for
It's
sure. I
it's the
mean, we do that to
sociopaths
each
that
other.
it's the sociopaths that are running. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's people right now that are laughing their asses off about all the suffering and the wars going on in the world. COVID-19, a lot of people made a lot of money on that. And
Hmm.
every time there's a war or there's a famine or something like that, there's always, there's a fire in Hawaii and people are just going, that's awesome. Now I can buy
Yeah.
up the land,
Right.
that's the loosh. Those are the parasites, right?
Yeah.
Not these advanced entities that couldn't have evolved. What you're saying is if they had started out being emotional leeches, suffering
Yeah.
leeches, they would have leached on themselves or destroyed their environment and they
Yeah.
would never have
Or
advanced
destroyed each other,
or
right?
destroyed each other, right?
Yeah.
Which
And
is the same path we're on, right?
yeah, exactly.
We have
Exactly.
sociopaths and leeches that are
Hmm.
living off of our suffering,
Right. Yeah.
benefiting from it. And I
Yeah.
think I think the people are transferring those emotions unconsciously. They're transferring that onto the phenomenon.
Oh
That's
yeah,
my
for
that's my
sure.
theory.
Yeah, it's a shadow projection, a Jungian shadow projection for
Yeah.
sure. Um,
And so you broke through that and realized that's not what's going on here. At what
yeah,
point did you realize this is an initiation?
after I was done.
So you didn't
Yeah.
go into this, you didn't have a revelation like this is initiation. Okay, let's just go through the
No.
initiation. You go through all of this psychosis, all this
Yeah.
suffering. This goes on for years. And you're
Well, no, it wasn't years. It was about 9 months.
so you went through this whole initiation in 9 months.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
It was within the same year.
And you had more than one psychotic break?
No, so it was like I found myself just in like I started to become very depressed, right? Like probably the certainly the deepest, darkest depression I have ever felt in my entire life, right? It was intense. Um and you know, I just kind of weathered it.
Were you suicidal?
I was at one point. I thought I can't keep doing this, right? I was sleeping with my light on, uh, if I slept at all, right?
You had an entity come to you, I think it was in the evening or during the day that beat the shit out of you. Or was it overnight? And your neighbor was like, "What were those kids doing, throwing bowling balls around?" It
Oh
was
yeah,
actually an entity beating the shit out of you, right?
yeah, right. So after I had this experience with a woman in my room, I realized I've had this experience before, right? Where I wake up and I can't move and things like that. And so I recalled an incident when I was still fairly new to the Navy at the time. I think it was at some point within my first 4 years in the Navy, I had moved into a condo and I had some roommates. And we were in the upstairs condo and there was a condo underneath us. Uh, and my roommates were gone. Um, and I was home alone. I think they had gone home to visit family or something like that. I think we might have been on some kind of stand down period, but this was when I was on the Wasp. I believe I was still on the Wasp at the time. And so I'm home alone and I'm just sitting in this chair in the sunroom and I fall asleep in the chair. It's daytime, it's going into evening, sun is setting. And I'm sitting there and I just feel tired and I fall asleep in this chair. And then at some point I start to have this nightmare, right? And I I wake up on the floor of the sunroom, right? And the wind has been knocked out of me and I can't breathe. And then all of a sudden I'm like, and I take a breath. And then I look to my right and there's this thing that's on the ground with me, right? Like we like we've been in a struggle or something. Um, and it I the only I've come across depictions of this the way this guy looks, but there's this there are these drawings that have been made of a craft that landed at an Air Force base. What do you know what I'm talking about?
No, not specifically.
What was it? I think it was some Air Force base where they landed, and the entities that are drawn from witness accounts is exactly what this thing looked like that was laying next to me. It's kind of got like a bigger kind of nose. Its eyes, the pupils of its eyes were like square. It was very odd. It had these kind of pointy teeth, and
What color?
they were white.
No, I mean the skin. What color was this? The
Oh, it was like a palish kind of uh palish grayish kind of color.
any clothes?
Yeah, it was like black and it had some kind of metallic band around its head. Um I don't know what
Now,
that
but
was.
this was before the gimbal.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
just had not, you hadn't
this was
connected
probably
it.
like this was probably like 2005 maybe.
Okay.
or
So you didn't
6.
connect it with anything.
No, no. Well, I did after the incident with the
Right.
blue lady, because I woke up, and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't move. Right. I felt that same kind of paralysis. Right. And
Right.
so, in this nightmare that I was having in the sunroom, what I thought was a nightmare. Right. I wake up, I take a breath, and then I can't really move. So I kind of fight to get to my hands and knees, and I'm like crawling across the floor trying to get to the sofa in the living room so that I can grab it and lift myself up off the floor, right? And like I'm crawling and I look back and I can see these legs standing there, right? And it looked like these, tailored pants with shoes. But I knew it was this monster, right? that was like chasing me. And so I'm crawling along and I can't lift my knees up off the ground. So my knees are just like on the carpet and I'm getting carpet burn on my knees and I'm just like rubbing them across the floor. And this is not happening quickly, right? And then I feel like the ground is a little bit wet and I'm slobbering because I can't even swallow, right? And then I kind of look up at the back of the sofa and I can feel the spit kind of hit my chin and I grabbed the back of the sofa. And then I woke up in my bed the next morning. Um, and I felt disgusting, right? That morning. I was like, when I woke up in the bed, I was like, I swear I fell asleep in that chair last night. Um, I don't know how I got to bed. I thought maybe I was getting sick, that I would have a fever by the end of the day or something like that. So I went to go take a shower and, I'm washing off with soap and then my knees start burning, right? Because the soap is going over my knees and I've got this rug burn. And I was like, oh, I must have been sleepwalking or something. This is odd, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so then I go downstairs. I'm gonna go grab a bite to eat. And I'm getting in my Jeep, and my neighbor from downstairs comes running out, literally running out of his condo towards me. And he is screaming at me, right? He's like, "Your fucking kids were up all night, making all kinds of noise." And he said at one point it sounded like they threw a goddamn bowling ball down the stairs. And I was like, whoa, dude, I was the only one home last night. I fell asleep early. I don't even know what you're talking about, And it was kind of, it was shocking to me that this guy, because I'm like, what is he talking about? Nothing happened last night, you know? Um, and so I just kind of blew that off as a bad dream or a nightmare or something. But after this encounter with the woman in my room and not being able to move, and then remembering that incident, I thought, oh, something happened that night. There was a struggle. Um, and I don't really remember all of what happened. But that was real, you know.
Wow. Yeah. And I know you had other experiences. You said that it went 9 months and then you came to some ultimate conclusion about all this.
Yeah,
And then it suddenly made sense. It all
yeah.
lined up, right? What was the
Right.
purpose behind all of this? What's the big picture? What the hell was going on this whole time? You called initiation. What
Yeah.
what are you talking about?
Right.
Because a lot of experiencers go through the same thing. They have these experiences. They can't talk to anybody else.
Right.
They're gonna and people are and experiencers are gonna watch this and they're gonna say, me too, me too, me too.
Hmm.
But they haven't figured it out.
Hmm.
They go online and they get caught in these different stories. They think it's prison plan, all that absurdity.
Right.
But you've come to a very specific metaphysical conclusion about all of this.
Yes. Yeah. And that is that I was initiated, right?
Into
And
what?
into higher consciousness. Um, and that was the point of everything that had happened to me, right? And I, people people kind of look at this and they say, well, it's not right what they're doing, right? But I can see the point of it, right? Because so if you think about higher consciousness, like what is that? Um, and the thing is, you have to have basically you have to have this balance of brain chemistry that's happening, right? And so in order to balance that, certain things need to happen, right? And one of the things that needs to happen is that you don't have any fear. You can't be afraid, right?
You mean at the end of the process,
Yeah,
the higher consciousness means you've lost your fear.
right.
You've
Hmm.
faced fears. And
Yes,
the only way to actually get over fear is to have to face it. You have to
right.
have these terrifying experiences
Hmm.
over and over again
Yes,
until you have no fear when they come.
until you decide that you're not going to be afraid anymore, right? That's a decision.
And so
And
this will, I mean, they basically knock the fear out of you.
yeah,
And that's
right.
why people have these experiences. They feel like they've been abducted, and it's
Hmm.
horrific. It's
Yeah.
painful.
Hmm.
And you're saying
Yeah, and
there's a reason why they don't use anesthesia.
yeah, exactly. Because you have to experience these things, right? It's not only fear, right? There's all kinds of baggage that pops up. Um, People like Whitley Strieber write about this, about how there's something to do with the dead, right? Because you encounter dead people, dead relatives. I've certainly, and I continue to have my share of experiences with both my mother and my younger brother who both passed away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, you have to have this correct brain chemistry. You have to have this correct outlook on what the universe is. And so this initiatory process kind of messes with that brain chemistry until you get it right, you know?
So that's why you call it initiation, because
Yeah.
it's basically a spiritual boot camp that always
Yeah.
brings you to a certain point. It brings you to a certain brain chemistry, a certain
Right.
set of knowings.
Hmm.
It's like sort of a zero point that everyone gets to when their initiation is completed,
Hmm.
regardless of the path that they take. So they
Yes.
basically got their normal life. The initiation starts. It's a boot
Hmm.
camp. They get the crap kicked out of them in all
Hmm.
kinds of various ways. That path
Yeah.
is never the same for everybody, but
Right.
it's always a process that gets you to the same place. So would you
Hmm.
say you're on the same page with anyone else that's been initiated?
Yeah.
It brings you on the same page
Hmm.
to a singularity
Yes.
of an initiate or initiated.
Hmm.
What would you call
Yeah.
yourself now? Just initiated?
Yeah. Initiated.
Okay.
And
And
that's
so
why I called the book Initiated.
yeah. So your hypothesis or your argument is basically everybody who's an experiencer
Hmm.
is at some step in this boot camp, and
Yeah.
there's a direction for it. There's a purpose and there's a meaning behind it. It's
Right.
a metaphysical journey
Hmm.
that does have an end.
Yes.
There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
It's not meaningless,
Right.
and not
You know,
everybody makes it.
no, they
Some people
don't.
wash out.
Um,
They commit
some people,
suicide. They end up
mhm,
in mental institutions.
yeah. Hmm. And and people will look at that and they say, well, this is evil then,
Right. It's
right?
demonic. It's
It's
demonic.
demonic because it puts you through the ringer, right?
It's
But
torture. It's
right,
literally
but
it's physical and spiritual torture.
it is, and
Something the
I
devil would do,
right,
and
yeah, yeah,
demons.
yeah.
It's that
Uh,
bad.
yeah, and so I also came to understand though that this experience that I had is the basis for all the world's religions, living or
No,
dead.
no, wait a minute. What? All the world's religion. So
Yeah,
Catholicism is the same thing.
yeah. Catholicism is based on this.
Islam. Well, it's based
Islam is
on it, but
based on it.
do they really get through the initiation if you're a lifelong Catholic or Mormon or Islam or whatever?
So if you've been through this, as I have,
Hmm.
right, you can look at these religions and you can see actually they're all the same.
Well, you can see
They
bits and pieces.
they only vary in their level of misinterpretation. And so I can see the experience I had in all of them, right? Whether you're talking about Hinduism, Buddhism, uh, Christianity,
Yeah.
even Islam. Um, I can see it in all of them. Uh, and so that's why, this experience with the light, that's why that this is embedded into world religions. It is the reason for world religions, right? And I came to understand that because this change is very profound. You have to understand that it's not just it's a little bit difficult to describe to people what this means, but I one of the ways that I described it was that the change, right, is the difference between we all know that we have instinct, right? We have this feeling of something, right? But then as you go through this process, that feeling of something vague kind of in the background becomes more and more pronounced, right? And it becomes to the pronounced to the point that in the end it's like a knowing, right? So
Right.
it's
It's knowledge. Actually, you
right.
know it.
So it's not instinct any longer. It's I know this about that, right? And in religions they talk about Christianity, like they talk about the eyes to see and the ears to hear, right? Or making the blind able to see, right? That's what this is all about, right? Because you suddenly understand what all of this is, right? It becomes obvious. Um, and I talk about this in terms of like if we all went through this, what it would mean for us, right? It would mean that, I can look out the window and I can see that the road out there is black, right? It's paved with asphalt. I could just look out the window and see that. We don't need to have a scientific study
Right.
about
A peer-reviewed
whether or not
journal, a
you're right,
peer-reviewed
right,
paper.
a peer-reviewed journal and paper that states that the asphalt is black, right? Of course it is. I can just look out the window and there it is, right? Well, this is the same thing, right? Where you know that there are certain truths about the universe and those truths are undeniable, and so you don't need to have a peer-reviewed paper stating an evidence and all the evidence is that you experienced it.
Your experience is your proof.
Right. And so you know that it's the truth. And so, it's just when I hear people talking about, oh, well, I need proof. Well, if you need proof, then go through this.
Have an
You
experience.
right, you can do this too. You just need to go and look out the window. And people won't do it. They do everything they can. They put on blinders. I can't see out the window. I refuse to look out the window, right? But that's why I'm writing this second book that I'm about to write here that it kind of goes into this because I've done this experiment and I say it's an experiment, but it's not really. Um, where I kind of talk about this in terms of Jungian psychology, right? So my idea is that if I could get people to see the world as I see it and explain it in such a way that they can see it too without having gone through this, that they'll start to think, oh yeah, there's something there, and I see that too. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I understand what you're getting at, and so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to in this new book giving people the eyes to see so
Mhm.
that they can see this for themselves, and know that there is in fact something there, right? And I use Jungian psychology to do that, to kind of lay the groundwork
Right.
for human behavior. So I kind of explain why people do the things that they do and how you can see that and and logically understand it, right? And
Right.
so then it makes sense. And I've done this with family members and they're like, yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
And so it becomes something that's not woo anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
something that you can actually wrap your mind around this and think about it and see that logically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, so for those who haven't read your book yet, and by the way, I think everyone who's an experiencer is going to get a lot of meaning out of your book, because I love how you start with your journey, and then you wake up in the morning with the name of an author that you've never heard of, and you read their books. And
Hmm.
so you're actually being taught
Yes.
things. You're going through your own initiation. They're kicking the crap out of you, but at the same time, you're being led, and they're preparing you. And when we say they, we're talking about non-human intelligences, aliens.
Yeah.
The non-human intelligences are preparing you to actually be able to teach this.
Yes.
You
Hmm.
know, you're the little bird that goes up in the clouds and hears music for the first time and comes back and is able to sing a song that other people can hear,
Right. Yeah.
right? You're bringing something to the
Exactly.
world that they wanted you to bring,
Yeah.
not because you're a guru, not because you're
Right.
trying to start an e-culture movement, just so you can
Right.
be a teacher.
Hmm.
And this goes back way back to the Greeks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the Greek
Absolutely.
mysteries. I'd love to
Hmm.
talk about that, because this Jungian thing you're talking about is really archetypes
Hmm.
that are deeply embedded in our psyches. They're
Yeah.
basically the foundation of our psyches.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
only four
Absolutely.
of them,
Hmm.
and they have a light and a shadow. How would you've got this, you talk
Um,
like it's like a pyramid with four sides,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
And
there's four psyches: the king,
lover,
the lover,
warrior,
the warrior, and the creator,
magician.
the magician,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And they have a shadow,
Hmm.
and that's where everybody's at today.
Right.
Everybody has those four archetypes, but
Yeah.
they're externalizing them. I'd love it. Can you sort of go into this, because
Yeah.
this goes way back to the Greeks. We used to have this figured out,
Hmm.
right?
Oh yeah, for
The Greeks
sure.
had this figured out totally.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
they actually had formalized this initiation process,
Hmm.
right?
Well, not just the Greeks. I would say I would argue that I can see this stuff in, you know, architecture and religious artifacts all over the world, whether you're talking about South America,
So,
Europe,
so
Asia.
you're talking about native peoples before
Oh yeah.
civilization. You're talking about
Hmm.
Native Americans, you're talking about South America,
Yeah.
you're talking about probably Aborigines, right? In Australia,
Yeah. Yeah.
Africa,
Hmm. Yeah,
Egyptians.
for sure.
So all of
Absolutely.
these, we call them primitive today, but basically before pre-civilization cultures already had this figured out.
Yeah.
And it's really a path that takes, correct me if I'm wrong, but it basically takes people from being a child to an adolescent to an adult,
Hmm.
so that when they're 25 years old, they're actually an adult.
Yeah.
And in our
Well,
society today, everybody gets older, but they don't necessarily grow up. And so
yeah.
you go to the workplace, and it's basically a junior high playground.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We see that in our
Yeah.
society. You go on social media, and
Hmm.
we're all acting like we're in elementary school or we're in junior high.
Yeah. And you have, 40-year-old toddlers walking around out there,
Exactly. And
you
that's
know.
what this initiation was all about. It makes you an adult, a
Hmm.
mature, standalone, independent, rational, healthy adult human being.
Yes.
That's really what this is about. It's that simple. It's not some weird
Yeah.
up in the clouds thing.
Yeah, it's
And
about civilization building ultimately, right? Because we don't know how to do that as humans. We don't know how to build, a just civilization. We need help with that. And then this goes back to the writings of Aristotle and Plato. They talk quite a bit about this kind of thing, that, that humans can't do that because we don't know how. We don't understand that there is this level of maturity that is beyond most of us, right?
okay, and that's where the non-human intelligences come into play. They
Yeah.
actually are the ones that do this initiation for us.
Yeah, and Plato even writes that, there is that present within humanity, there is some vestige of the gods that is sometimes observed, right? And he's talking about people who are philosophers, people like himself, people who have been initiated, who can kind of teach and show you these things about yourself and about your own mind. And certainly the Greeks had this idea that you needed to keep a manicured and very reined in mind, right? You needed to control yourself and your emotions. That's what Stoicism was all about. So to talk about the archetypes a little bit, this one of my favorite authors on this topic, Dr. Robert Moore, he describes them as, and if you follow me on Twitter, I have a pinned tweet to a series of 5 lectures that he gave to other PhDs, kind of describing his theory.
What is your
Right.
Twitter?
It's Matthew Roberts UAP, I think.
Okay.
Um,
Easy to
and
find.
what's
Easy to find.
yeah. Yeah. Oh no, it's Matthew Roberts or it's UAP philosophy, I think is what my handle actually is.
Okay.
But anyway, so his theory is this, that you can map the human subconscious. It's already been done, right? And that subconscious is it's not pliable. Right. It is what it is. And
It's hard coded. It's like ROM. It's
right. And so when you are coming up against initiation, it's like he describes it. He says you're hitting a bridge abutment, right? You are going to take the shape of that rather than it taking your shape, right? It's permanent. It's fixed. It is inherent in everything. And you will take that shape. And so you make yourself resemble the subconscious. That's what the initiation process does. It makes you into that. The king, the lover, the warrior, and the magician, all operating in their fullness rather than in their shadow. And so the way to kind of, and a lot of people get intimidated by the idea of archetypes, but you just need to think about them as psychological lines of development is all they are. And so you're going to develop yourself into the king, the lover, the warrior, or the magician. And this is there are many stories written about these archetypes. It's what mythology is all about. And teaching the lessons of how to kind of cultivate those things in their fullness. And so you think about the ideal king, the ideal warrior, the ideal lover, and the ideal magician, and you need to embody those kind of qualities.
and internalize them. This is about internal. This is about
Right,
how you feel, how you think.
right.
It's what's going on in your mind. It's
Yeah. Yeah, you
rather
need
than
to
what's on the
become that.
outside world. You become it yourself. This is
Right.
about becoming and being,
Hmm.
not necessarily about doing and the external
Yeah. And, and
world.
so and so these archetypes actually they are the subconscious and they are constantly pressing. They're always pressing us for wholeness. And so believe it or not, everything that you do is a result of this archetypal pressure from within. Um, but you don't really understand that that's what's happening. And so you can either, and Carl Jung coined these terms, you can either be an introvert or an extrovert, which means that you either take that archetypal energy and you paint the world with it, you project it, right? So, kind of a quick, easy example of that is like you seek out these qualities in others that you want within yourself. And
Right.
so that's what kind of attraction is. You're attracted to someone who has these qualities. You want them around you. And what a lot of people will do, especially in like a marriage or a relationship with a significant other, they'll say, "Oh, I don't have to be the warrior because he's that for me." And so you're projecting that aspect of yourself on them, and they become a possession of you.
An attachment.
Right, an attachment. This is what Buddhist attachments, this idea of attachments, this is what they are, right? It's you projecting these things on the world. And so the guy in a relationship, he'll be like, "Well, I don't have to be the lover, she does that for me." And so so you let her hold that, and she becomes an aspect of yourself in that sense. But the idea is to be whole unto yourself, right? To cultivate these things within yourself and become whole,
It's about being a
psychologically.
whole person. This is about awakening. This is what everybody
Yeah.
wants. This is nirvana.
Right. This is how to get there. This is how you do this.
That's what awakening is where you've
Right.
got it all on yourself.
Yeah, and one of the last tweets I sent out last night was something that I came across uh from you. It was the idea of what is evil. Um
Right.
and I posted this video, and it talks about how evil is just these archetypal projections that we're doing as a civilization, right? So we find a scapegoat that maybe is has all of the qualities of the things within ourselves that we don't like. And so we point at that person and say, that person has all these qualities. And so you ritually destroy that.
By
And that,
destroying them.
right. And so that's what's happening. That was what was happening in Nazi Germany with the Jews. They became the scapegoat, the other,
Demonizing
right?
the other.
And so you ritually destroy that. But what the interesting thing is that if you're an extrovert and you're painting the world with this stuff, what you have to understand is that this energy, this archetypal energy is very destructive. It is absolutely destructive because the idea is that this is going through your mind, right? When you internalize this, and it is destroying false concepts in your mind, destroying these false ideas. But when you paint the world with it and you act out this destruction, um, it becomes very, very dangerous.
Hmm.
Um, and Jung talks about that. He says, because I say in my book that all four of these archetypes in their fullness kind of comprise the hero, which is like the idea of the hero's journey, or the just the ultimate person, right? And so, or the savior, rather. The savior is all four of those together. And so when you're an introvert, you become the savior of yourself. You save yourself. But if you're an extrovert, you're looking for that savior in some other figure, right?
Right, right. Got it.
And if you're an extrovert, Jung talks about Adolf Hitler, and he says, he was supposed to be a savior. People, that's why they put him on the altars and the pedestals, because he was their Christ figure, right? They
Hmm.
worshiped him. And so that's the danger with this kind of stuff, is that you'll take these things from your mind that are kind of pressing you, and you paint the world with them, and so you end up just destroying the world. Um, and it's unfortunate, but
Right. And in the book,
it's
you say that the antidote is very simple. It's radical self-truth.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Stop lying to yourself in
right,
every
yeah,
way. Even
right.
the little lies, even the little white lies you tell yourself.
Yeah, and
Get rid of them.
I didn't understand this until I watched this video of a woman who was psychologist at Stanford talk, and she specializes in addiction treatment. And this was on Kurt J. Mungel's Theory of Everything. And she's talking about how with addiction treatment, the way you treat addiction is that you take the person who is addicted, obviously, to something, and they can no longer lie to themselves at all, right? You can't tell yourself these little white lies about how, oh, I don't have a problem. It's not me, right? Um, because the extrovert tells themselves these lies, right? They they may have the opinion that, oh, well, I wouldn't have to hit you if you didn't make me so angry, right?
They blame
Rather than,
others for their emotions. You made me
right,
feel that. You made me
right.
do that. I'm
When
triggered
when
by you.
right, when it's really a matter of controlling yourself.
Right.
Um, but they paint that on you, and you become the source of that for them. So, in addiction treatment, you can no longer tell yourself these lies if you're truly going to cure yourself of this addiction. And so when you stop doing that, that has a cascading effect throughout the rest of your life. And I had wondered why so much of this awakening stuff is happening in addiction treatment facilities. I was seeing that all over Reddit, right? And I didn't really understand why until I saw this interview, because I didn't know how they were treating addiction, right? I knew it had something to do with this, but I couldn't exactly put my finger on it until I heard her talking. And then I was like, oh, that's it. You no longer tell yourself these little lies, and you take responsibility, accountability for your own actions, your own emotions, your own addiction, right? And so you end up having this awakening experience alongside of that as a result. It's very common occurrence, actually. Yeah,
And this is the hero's journey.
it is. Yeah, Joseph Campbell writes about this. And Joseph Campbell had everything to do with Star Wars. So Star Wars is obviously the story of the hero's journey. But once again, when you read these stories, a lot of this is just, and people love to watch these stories because it's like the hero, right? They can project themselves onto that hero on the silver screen rather than living that themselves. Um,
Does it hold them back? Is that what you're saying? It holds them back?
I don't know that it holds them back, but I mean, certainly if someone were to sit down and explain this stuff to you, you would be able to see it, right? This is why the hero's journey is such a popular motif in our culture, because everyone kind of subconsciously is aware of this, and everyone projects that hero onto, someone they deem worthy of being the hero, the savior,
Right. But
right?
the point is that they've got to internalize it. They've
Yeah,
got to be Luke. They've
right.
actually got to be the hero. It's one thing to see it on the screen. It's another thing to actually do it yourself. And the
Hmm.
non-human intelligence, they seem to basically be a mediator between you and the source,
Yeah, they're trying to get you in touch with that aspect.
a direct connection to divinity. What do you
Mhm.
call that? People call it the universe. People call it God, the source, origin.
I don't know. I'll call it all of the above. I mean, it's all the same thing, really. If you're talking about source, you're talking about God. It's really just different words for the same thing. So I don't really care what you call it, as long as you understand that that is a thing, right? Uh,
Right.
so and I would, like I said, I was an atheist. I never believed this stuff. There's no way I would have believed this had it not happened to me. And so that's what I'm trying to explain to people, is that this isn't just woo. This is very real. Um, Science, though, won't be sufficient because and this is just the next step in human evolution, whether you want to believe that or not, where you have introversion and extroversion, right? Where extroversion is just the old way of doing things, and introversion is like the next step in human evolution. It's the emergent evolutionary track, right? Um, and so you're seeing these two levels happening in humanity today, and people don't. It's causing a lot of friction. People who are more introverted and people who are more extroverted. That's why we see all of this polarity, political polarity, polarity about everything. You see it in society. It's very polarized because there's this evolutionary emergent track that's happening in this split.
Right. And it looks like the non-human intelligences are more directly intervening in people's lives.
Yeah.
In the experiences group on Reddit, there's just a huge increase in people having experiences.
Hmm.
Those are that have had experiences are having more profound experiences, a lot more experiences like you've had with actual entities of
Right.
different types, physically appearing to them, physically taking them. We're now hearing about this through, quote unquote, full disclosure. at the government level, where they're actually finally admitting that there are craft, that there are beings. I mean, where we're at today in the world versus even like 2 years ago is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And you see this as some kind of a pattern, that there's momentum behind this, there's a purpose. And it really is that each individual on their own goes through this initiation process and becomes enlightened on their own and makes a direct connection to God. Did I
Yeah.
summarize that correctly?
Yeah. Yeah. Basically,
Okay.
that is the basic gist of it. But you know, it's more that it's deeper than just God, right? Because and this is a little hard. I don't know if I should even into this because
Hey, listen, we've been at this for 2 hours. Just go for it.
It's a little bit more abstract, but
Just say anything you want. We burned off everybody that doesn't care about what we're talking about.
so
There's
the
only like 3 or
universe,
4 people that
right?
are going to watch this, so let them have it.
The universe kind of bends towards creation,
Right.
right? Create the creation of everything that is.
Right.
And so how does it do that? Well, there's this idea that it maybe needs the human form to do that, right? To work within the creation to create.
You mean to take on a physical body that's a human body and have the human experience?
Well, to have the human create the human experience.
Are you talking about sex?
Well, yeah, that's part of it, but I'm also talking about creating life, you know, generating life,
Right.
generating experience, but you can do that on if you have, you know, 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and a head, you can do that, and you've got technology on
Oh,
your side. You can do that on a massive scale.
you're talking about
Right?
creativity, creating art, creating music,
Yeah,
creating
that's the
building
same thing.
things, and making an environment where people can actually be born and grow. And
Yeah. hmm
that's what you mean by life, the life experience
Yeah.
in its
And
totality. And that
yeah,
we have a mortal probation, basically.
yeah, until we learn,
Right.
right? Until we learn how to do this.
Okay. So are you talking about reincarnation?
Yeah. I
So
think
we
that's
have multiple mortal probations.
hmm
So if we don't get this initiation and we don't become enlightened in
hmm
this lifetime, we basically recycle and have another mortal probation where we might figure out a little bit more and then a little bit more.
hmm
Is
Yeah,
That's
and
what
then
you're talking about?
figuring it out is the name of the game. And but you know, there's people who are taught these things, right? Like myself and philosophers that have always lived that they're here to teach people how to do this because it's more of a conscious step than it is. I'm sure evolution plays some part in it, but I think that for the most part, it has to be a conscious step into it, right? You have to kind of develop yourself. Um, and if you don't put in that effort, then you're not getting anywhere. You're not moving. You're just stagnant.
Right.
No.
So our lives are not about being consumers.
No. Mm-mm. In fact, consuming is just you chasing the symbols of these archetypes in the mind, like symbols of the warrior, symbols of the king. You know, so people end up chasing wealth and things like that because they think that that's what brings you this kind of mental stability and this inner peace, but it really doesn't. You can have $10 million in the bank and be an alcoholic, drug addict, messed up individual with zero inner peace, right? Um, that is possible. So it's not about the money, it's about the inside, what you're looking to cultivate within yourself. And the extrovert obviously is just looking for the symbols of that. Money, right?
Status,
Influence, power
influence,
over
pleasure.
others, right? Um, rather than chasing the real thing itself. You know, Guy Debord, he was a philosopher. I think he was French. He wrote this book. What was it called? uh, Society of the Spectacle, right? Where he talks about people chasing the spectacle. And what he's talking about is this extroversion
Hmm.
of the psyche onto the world. And so you end up chasing these symbols. And he describes the spectacle as a commodity, right? The things that you can buy that are symbols of this stuff. I, I don't know if he really understood what he was writing about when he called it the spectacle, but it's certainly the extrovert's life is what he's painting a picture of in that book, Society of the Spectacle.
Yeah.
And that's what the movie Nope is all about. That I don't know if you saw it.
Oh, I love Nope.
Yeah,
I love that.
but it's all about the chasing of the spectacle. That's what
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
That's the point of the movie. And so people went to go see that movie thinking they were going to see like a UFO movie, and they were like, "This isn't a UFO movie." Well, no, actually, it absolutely is. It's about the spectacle, which is
Yeah.
not what you're looking for.
So let's talk about the spectacle. And
Hmm.
Nope is a great segue into this. I want to talk about Skinwalker Ranch because
Hmm.
it seems like it is a spectacle of some kind.
Yeah.
You wrote your book in 2020, and in the book, you have specific things you say about Skinwalker Ranch and your opinion,
Hmm.
and you sort of predict what's going to happen. And most of that is actually what's happening now. There's these paranormal hotspots around the world where they become a spectacle. That's why they're hotspots. They're
Yeah.
locations where people end up talking a lot about, and people go to these hotspots and they have experiences, and it sort of proliferates. And we have to admit that these hotspots are real hotspots of the paranormal.
Hmm.
The non-human intelligences have chosen these locations, and
Hmm.
that's what's drawn humans to begin with. When it comes to Skinwalker Ranch, it seems that it was the Native Americans that were there identified this location as something special
Hmm.
because they've got the spiral up there. They it looks like they performed ceremonies right there on the mesa on Skinwalker Ranch. And so humans were sort of drawn, whether there's a meteor that struck there or something, but there was something about the location that was a hot spot. And then the Native Americans identified it and did their rituals there. And then it's sort of gone on from there. And now it's a super spectacle. The
Hmm.
Skinwalker Ranch show has 14 to 15 million people watch it when it comes on. People are
Yeah.
streaming it all year long. There's a membership. There's 10,000 people. We've got 35,000 followers on the Skinwalker Ranch subreddit.
Hmm.
Um, so tell me, what's your opinion of Skinwalker Ranch? Is it an initiatory site
Yeah.
today? And is that really what this is about?
Yeah. I
People watch
it,
the show and they have the hitchhiker effects. They
mhm.
become obsessed with Skinwalker Ranch. They can't stop reading. They can't stop talking about it, thinking about it, because they're actually being initiated by non-human intelligences.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's what that's what it's always been about. A lot of these sites around the world, like when the Greeks built the Temple of Delphi, there was this idea that there was something came from the sky and landed there. And so this Delphi is the center of the world, right? And so the same is true for Skinwalker Ranch. I think I remember Thomas Winterton talking about how there was I think this was in an interview he did years and years ago, and I was listening to it, and he describes how like there was this ball of light that came up out of the ground and then kind of went back into the ground. And so you can imagine if ancient people are seeing something like that, that they would build some kind of temple there, right?
And they've got the spiral, and it's
Right.
clearly been used for a long, long time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You see that everywhere. You see that Native American art, you see that in Europe in cave paintings, you see that everywhere.
The petroglyphs that they have there,
Hmm.
they have them nearby at McConkey Ranch. They have one that they found on the ranch itself
Hmm.
that's very, very old. Um,
And I one of the examples I use is 9 Mile Canyon,
mm,
which is kind of right near there. There's
very
this
near.
they call it the Santa Claus glyph because it looks like these reindeer, right? Well, this process of initiation is like a kind of a death and resurrection. That's the way it's always been described. Even in terms of the Greek mysteries, they described it that way, a death and a rebirth. And so, in looking at that glyph, you can see that it starts out with like this. I don't know if they are reindeer, actually, some kind of local.
There's elk and there's
elk
deer.
or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
but it shows one that's like kind of fully grown and then they get smaller, and then they get bigger again. And it's like, well, that's what it's described. And there's like 9 of them. It's not like 9 months, and it's showing this kind of idea of like you're fully grown now, but then you're going to become this baby again and be reborn, right? And
This
so
is
that's
so let's talk about this death and rebirth. What you're talking about is a psychic death. People call it an ego death.
mhm,
When people do psychedelics, what I've heard is that they experience a death. They
mhm,
like die in some way,
yeah,
where they actually face their death. People who have near-death experiences obviously go through this.
yeah,
You went through that.
mhm,
Wouldn't you say your pulmonary embolism was that same kind of a thing,
yeah, mhm,
where you died
yeah,
and
I
then you
did.
came back? People also have experiences where they almost died or they should have died and didn't.
Mhm,
So this is what you're talking about, the death and rebirth, right?
yeah,
And you said it goes over 9 months.
yeah. If you do it correctly, it's just something that should last a season, and it should be over. But a lot of if you're more extroverted, right? And this also goes back to Aristotle. He talks about how how you have to have like a certain amount of knowledge heading into this. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the sauce
Yeah,
and
you
it's
don't know
not
what's
going to be
going
good.
on. I
Right.
mean, you're saying that Skinwalker Ranch is an initiatory site.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly.
what you're basically saying is that the guys on the ranch, the team that's on the ranch, Thomas and Travis, that they're actually going through an initiation process
Hmm.
and not even knowing it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. They have no idea that that's what this is about.
And in their personal lives, they're having things happen, and they're,
Hmm.
you know, people have said publicly that Travis is now lost in the woo. We know that
Right.
Thomas had his head injury,
Hmm.
and they're all
Yeah.
psychologically going through this. The guys that are actually on the ranch, even the
Right.
cameraman, right?
And people don't understand it and they call it high strangeness. But if you think in terms of this archetypal stuff, you can actually see that yes, this is in fact it does fit, you know. Um and you see this with people who go through psychosis, right? I was just recently reading a book of and this guy he kind of went through this. It was kind of drug induced and he had this psychosis. He was checked into mental hospitals, but he started acting very strangely, right? His friends were scared. They were
Mm-hmm.
scared out of their minds for him because he's like dressing up, he's running down the street like a crazy person, acting out
Mm.
archetypally, right? If you
What do you mean?
understand what you're looking at. Well, so there's like one point where he I think put on a costume, of a unicorn and was running down the street. Uh and so he's acting out archetypally, right? So the unicorn obviously is something that doesn't exist or is rare, right? And here he's found it, and so he's putting it on and he's running down the street telling everybody about it, and he's this is like, but this is what people think of as psychosis, right? They think that this kind of acting out is just nonsensical, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, and there was one point where he was found like and he was whispering to the wind. But if you understand like mythology and how they describe the 4 elements or whatever, and so suddenly now it doesn't seem so strange because if you think about it archetypally, right, he's talking to these 4 archetypes, right? But he's just acting it out, and people don't see that. They don't understand that. And so just like with alien abduction, they call it high strangeness. When they see someone doing this stuff, they'll call it mental illness, but it's really just this archetypal energy that is bubbling to the surface that as an extrovert, you don't know what to do with it. And so you just end up kind of acting things out.
Okay. So what
And
are they supposed to do? What does the guy with the unicorn outfit? What does he do?
well, if he had someone like me who could sit there at the very beginning, at the very outset of this, and kind of explain it to him, right, in a way that makes sense, then he would understand. I'm feeling this need to act this out, but really this is just something that is about me, and I need to internalize that and kind of turn that mirror onto myself rather than putting it out there and acting this out. I need to figure out why I'm feeling this and what to do about it. Does that make sense? I need to interpret these symbols and figure out what is wrong with me and my own psychology and the way that I think about things. And
I understand what you're saying, but can you give me a concrete example? I mean, like, what would you
well,
literally
like,
tell him to do? Take off the unicorn outfit
yeah,
and do what? Look in the mirror? Analyze the lies they're telling themselves? And what are the actual steps? I'm talking about practical
yeah.
steps, not in a
So
philosophical way, but like literally, okay, you sit this guy down and say, okay, take off the unicorn
right,
outfit and do what?
right, and I would tell him, look, you're thinking that you're a unicorn here because you've had this experience that is incredibly rare, right? But you need to stay grounded about it and just recognize it for what it is, and you don't need to act out. This is totally normal, right? And so we don't need to be acting these things out. You need to internalize these things, um, rather than and think about them rather than just acting on impulse. You need to stop the impulsiveness.
Okay, so
Don't.
don't don't act out, but
Mhm.
internalize. So just don't do anything about it.
No, well, I mean, it depends on what it is, right? Because people act out in all kinds of ways,
So, but you've got the four archetypes,
right?
and in
Yeah.
this case, it's trying to be the what the warrior.
Well, he's well, what he's going for is kind of the magician, right?
Okay, he's trying to go for the
Yeah.
magician.
Hmm.
Okay, and
Right.
so
Right. And
he's
being
doing, but he's actually doing the shadow magician.
right, 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 right.
So how
He's
does he
going
turn
that
that
route.
around?
So you turn that around by saying that yes, these things are happening to you. Yes, they're real, and you need to remain grounded about it. But people
The,
won't. So this is the thing. People start to experience these things, right?
the high strangeness.
The high strangeness, and they
It goes to their
start
head.
right. They start to kind of internalize it, and so maybe they go through this, but at the same time, it does go to their head and they may start telling people they're Jesus Christ, because
Yeah.
they're not remaining grounded. And this is such an important thing to do. This is why, when Buddha is sitting there underneath the tree and he's meditating just before his enlightenment, the armies of darkness are descending upon him. He reaches down and he touches the earth, right? And that just means, you go back to your roots. You were grounded before. You can be grounded through all of this again. You don't need to go crazy. But if you have people telling you you're crazy, right? And then you feel these urges to act out
To act crazy.
archetypally,
What
yeah,
you're
you're gonna
saying
act
is
crazy.
experience the psychosis, but don't act on the psychosis. So if
Yeah, you
someone
don't.
actually does think that they're Buddha, don't tell
Right,
anybody you're Buddha.
right.
But
Or
still,
just
but still,
recognize. So recognize it for what it is. Like in the Greek mysteries, right? You could not be. They wouldn't let you go through this unless you were sponsored by somebody that had been through it before. So you had to be sponsored. Someone was there with you,
who'd already
uh,
been through it.
right? So that you didn't have this kind of unguided chaos, right? It's going to be chaos for sure, but there needs to be some wisdom and some grounding there, um, and someone else can pull you back into reality from that, if that makes sense. Because otherwise, you're just going to drift away.
Yeah. So going back to the guys on the ranch that are actually
Yeah.
physically there all the time. They're filming the show.
Mm.
You're saying that they're going through this initiatory process, and it could be the personas that they're actually presenting on the show, right? Thomas wears the hat. Eric's always got the tan shirt. Brandon comes in with his black out. There's all these, I don't want to
Yeah.
call it cosplay, but there's these roles that they're playing on the show. Meanwhile, they're having these paranormal high strangeness experiences on the ranch and in their personal lives. And what do you say is going to happen next in that situation as they keep filming more and more seasons of the show?
I really don't know
Because they're
because I think,
experiencing the high strangeness, and
right, they are.
it's getting
And
higher.
they don't know what it means.
They don't know what it means. They haven't put the dots together. They haven't
And
connected the dots.
the thing to me is I watch that show and I'm like, oh my God, every episode is the same. Like a normal person watching that show is going to watch that show and they're like, what the hell is going on here? This is so strange, right?
High strangeness.
Right. But I see something different, right?
Really?
Every, yes, I do. On nearly every episode, the whatever they're getting is has a message, right? And that message is usually look inside, go inside, right?
I know. I wondered that. It's probably saying, what were you thinking, or what are you feeling? What's going on in your life right now?
Right. Like they see like all of these, they collect all this data and they see it's going underground, right? Go underground, go inside.
Oh, the mesa.
Or it's going into the mesa, right? Go
Right.
inside. And then there's this other time where like they see something in the sky and so they run back into the lab thing that they've
Command
got set
center.
up. Yeah, and like things are echoing, right?
Right.
Right, because they're inside, so it's like an echo chamber.
Yeah.
It's just to me it's obvious, right, what's going on, but they or whenever they start feeling dizzy, they go inside this dark metal thing
Yeah.
that they have there, right? And they sit in there for a few minutes. They start to feel dizzy or whatever, right? And it's like go inside.
You'll
You need
go
to,
inside the cave, right?
yeah, look inside. And people often when they're going through this kind of thing, they'll have nightmares of being underground. You
Or
see
being
that
in the cave, the dark
yeah,
night of the soul,
you see that over and over
the
again.
dark night of the soul.
Right. And they'll
Yeah.
describe being in this underground place and they can see roots coming through the ceiling of like trees that are growing above. So you know you're underground and you are in the underground. You're inside, right?
Yeah. Now they're also obsessed, early on in the first season, like 3 episodes into it, they did some triangulation once and they said, well, the phenomenon's over the triangle. There's a wormhole over the triangle. And they're just obsessed with this triangle. And
Right.
it's really just where the road, because they're driving the fields, they have the cars go. It's the physical triangle you see is just because that's where the tractor used to go when it was actually a ranch.
Hmm.
Do you think that triangle, and they're drilling into the mesa right there at the triangle? What do you think about that? And they really believe that the main phenomenon is right above that triangle, and
Right.
psychically a lot of shit happens there.
Hmm.
And they validate it over and over again that there's something. The high strangeness focal point is that triangle.
Right.
What do you read into that?
Well, so, that's also very archetypal because that triangle is a place where all of these different paths converge,
Yes.
right? It's a convergence point.
And it's a pyramid.
Right. And it's in the form of a triangle,
You
which
have a triangle on your book cover.
yes, I do. But that's because it's a part of the Philosopher's Stone, right? If you look at in terms of alchemy, right, you have the sacred marriage which lies within the triangle and you've the man and the woman, right? But what that really is talking about is this convergence of your own psyche with its other aspect, which is consciousness, right? Where you merge with the subconscious and you begin experiencing the subconscious as a whole. It's the sacred marriage of those two things. And that's what the alchemical symbol is kind of all about. But yeah, so they're at this convergence point, and everything is telling them go inside, and so they're interpreting this as like we need to drill inside the mesa because this is where all this strangeness is coming from. But they're extroverting it, right? They're not realizing that this means go inside yourself. This is an internal journey, right? But they're going to drive themselves mad destroying the mesa, ripping up the triangle in the ground, and
Well,
they're not going to get anywhere with
well,
that.
the results are always inconsistent.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. It's
Yeah, it's
anomalous.
nonsense.
They're awash in data now. They're buried in all this
Yeah.
data, and they just added more cameras and more sensors, and it doesn't seem to be converging. And at the same time, and they're looking at the physical aspects of it.
Mhm.
They've said publicly that they have a lot of woo in their
Yeah.
personal lives. They have a lot of woo that happens on camera, and the History Channel says absolutely you can't show any woo. In
Mhm.
fact, the History Channel doesn't allow them to talk about the hitchhiker effect, which
Mhm.
is core to everything that happens. People even watching the
Yeah.
show have hitchhiker effects.
Mhm.
And so they're going down one path, and at the same time, you're saying this is an initiation site, and it's really about awakening,
Mhm.
right? And the alchemist's journey,
Mhm.
and you've got
Yeah.
the symbolism of the triangle, and you're putting this together for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the same thing, right? Whether you're talking about alchemy or you're talking about religion or whatever. I one of the things that I point to as kind of a convergence of those two things is this guy who was a famous alchemist, Falconelli. He lived in France around the turn of the century, and rumor has it that the Nazis were looking for him because of what he knew about alchemy. But he uh, he wrote this book, Mystery of the Cathedrals. He was anonymous as well. He Nobody knew who he really was, but he talks about the alchemical symbolism built into Notre Dame, right? And Notre Dame was basically destroyed. I don't know how much of that alchemical symbolism still remains today, but
Mhm.
he was certainly right. And Dr. Robert Moore in his lectures also talks about this, about how these guys who built these cathedrals, they weren't they weren't just your everyday run-of-the-mill stonemasons, right? And this is the idea of masonry. Um, but they were mystics. They were Christian mystics who knew these things, and so they built these symbols into the cathedrals, right? Knowing that this was kind of if the church writ large had known they were doing this, it probably would have not gone over well. And so
Mhm.
it was kind of this secretive thing, right? We're building these statues of these monks, whatever, in a certain order so that you understand what we're putting down, but it's not obvious, right? Unless you really do your research
Was
and
it
understand
intent?
what this.
Was it intended to speak directly to your unconscious, or was it meant that there would be like one person, an elder, that could take people into the cathedral and point that stuff out? Does
Oh,
that
I'm
make
sure there
sense?
was that too. It was both, yeah.
Because you
It
don't
was.
really understand, you can go in there and you don't really get it, but maybe your
Mhm.
unconscious gets it.
Yeah, right. Like your unconscious will feel a pull, which is why people are religious, because they feel this pull. They know that there's something greater than themselves out there, but they
Yeah,
they aren't
God.
they aren't sure uh what that means or how to put your finger on it, right?
How do you explain the pull of Skinwalker Ranch? Because people do absolutely feel called to it.
Hmm.
They become obsessed with it. They talk about it. I'm going to point at myself. It's sort of taken over all of my other hobbies.
Right.
Um, what's going on there? Why am I pulled and other people are called to the ranch?
Well, because you know that there's this high strangeness that happens there, right? Which is everyone throughout time has known that these types of places are places that if you are looking for change, this is where you have to go. And so it becomes this place where you'll make a pilgrimage to,
Yeah,
a holy site.
but they don't want people doing a pilgrimage. It's not a place you can go and
Well, they may not want that, but that's what's going to end up happening.
can't you do it virtually? Is there a way we can use the internet
I don't I don't know.
because that's just a disaster to go. People have to physically go there to complete their initiation.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
What?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not necessarily, but uh, uh,
You didn't have
it,
to physically go back to the aircraft carrier.
no.
You
Mm-mm.
didn't have a site you had to physically go to.
No. But throughout human history, that's the way things have been, right?
Yes, yes. But in our
People
day
make
and age,
pilgrimages to
yeah,
holy
no,
sites.
that's true. Yeah, like Mecca, exactly.
And I
Um,
think that the Native Americans also did that with Skinwalker Ranch,
it
which is
was
why
there
you
was
have,
the path of the Skinwalker.
right, where
It,
you have people who would, you would have an initiated person take a group of younger people. He was a ritual elder. He would take them through the canyon. They would see these paintings. He would tell them stories. They would go through the process. And so it was this whole pilgrimage that he would lead them on in that area, right? Because that
oh,
area
absolutely.
is known for having that type of activity. And
Yeah,
that's
probably.
why
Mhm.
probably usually churches and temples are built on the place where they are because it's a place where these things are known to happen,
Right,
right?
but in a location where you really can't go and do the pilgrimage, how do you do that without doing the pilgrimage? What
Well,
do
I
all these
mean,
people all these people called to Skinwalker Ranch can't go?
well, this is so it's seasonal, right? And if you are, and I feel like if you ask, right, and you ask honestly, I think that if you're ready, it'll happen. But sometimes you can ask and ask honestly, and if you may not get it, right? And so you're gonna get stuck in this for years. Some people, and that's one of the things that I really didn't like about this whole thing is that there were people who have literally been stuck in this process for decades,
Yeah, yeah, and it
right?
should be 9 months.
Yeah, and that is it's totally unnecessary that people get stuck there for decades.
How do
If you
they get
just,
unstuck?
well, you got to figure out what it is that you're not doing, right? I think that there's all kinds of things people could still be the thing is you got to give up all attachments, right? That's the Buddhism says this. So you have to stop projecting at all, right? So you have to isolate yourself. It is a very delicate balance in the brain, this brain chemistry. And so you can't have anything external that's really uh giving you grief or playing against this. So you really have to isolate yourself to the extent that you can, right? And just do it. Like
And
kind of like a caterpillar going into cocoon, right? You have to just climb in there and stay there.
so
And
isolate yourself and then call on the non-human intelligences, call on these entities to help you, and
yeah,
probably read your book because you
yeah,
are a teacher. You've been through this.
mhm,
I think that's why you had to. We talk about being called to Skinwalker Ranch. I think
yeah,
you were called to be a teacher and to share this knowledge. I wouldn't have known any of this if it wasn't for you, Matthew.
yeah.
And I take this very personally because, I was 10, 11 years old when I saw craft on Skinwalker Ranch.
Hmm.
That was my initiation. You had the aircraft carrier and I had Skinwalker Ranch.
Hmm.
And I've had just a series of synchronicities that have gotten me here today to talk to you, you know, and I'm trying to figure this out for myself.
Hmm.
And I haven't been out to the Una Basin in 30 years. And I tried to go in 2020. And when I got an hour into the drive, I hit a wall.
Hmm.
I'm getting really personal here, but that's what happened to me. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about going to the ranch, I don't know. I'm probably going to end up going at some point. What's going to happen? What happens when people make the pilgrimage to Skinwalker
Well,
Ranch?
it means that you're putting in a certain amount of effort, right? And in antiquity, that was a big deal to travel like that, right? Because it's not
It's
like,
the journey.
yeah, you couldn't just hop in your car and go there, right? You had to walk,
So I
basically.
should walk to Skinwalker.
No, no, it just means that you're putting in effort, right? Is
Well, I'm
what it.
putting an effort. I'm doing this podcast. I'm
Yeah.
moderating. I'm talking to people. I'm helping other people. I'm
Hmm.
talking to you. But can
Yeah.
I just go in my basement and figure this out?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can.
you can. Yeah, I mean, like I said, isolate yourself. Um,
And do what? Just call on the entities and
no,
see what happens?
you start reading books, you
I,
stop lying to yourself.
I'm working on it.
Um, and if you're doing this is one of the things that I love to tell people. If you start doing this kind of psychological work, you're gonna realize that your dreams start to change,
Yeah.
right? You're gonna have more vivid dreams more frequently.
Yes.
Um, and those
Yes.
dreams are gonna speak to you in the same kind of archetypal way. Um, and so,
Yeah.
that's just what happens. And I came to understand that actually that's what a nightmare is, right? You're killing out this idea in the psyche, and so you end up having a nightmare. That's what a nightmare is doing. It's your psyche ridding itself of this falsehood, archetypally, right? And
Yeah, yeah. You had horrific nightmares for a
I
long
did.
time. Like
Hmm.
horrific, brutal, like people getting cut out. I just like
Yeah.
brutal things.
Hmm.
And that was basically purifying you.
Yeah. Hmm. I
And
would wake up from a nightmare, and I would look back at my bed and there would just be this outline of my body in sweat on the bed because I was just like drenched in sweat because the nightmare was just so intense. Uh, and that was a common occurrence throughout this. Yeah.
have they stopped?
Oh yeah. I haven't had, and that's the thing is that's when everything changed. Like they're not in my life on a day-to-day basis. They don't need to be. Right? They don't need to show up in my room anymore. We've done that, right? And I got it. I got the point. And so that doesn't need to happen anymore. Um, Occasionally I'll still see something, but it doesn't bother me, not one bit. Um, if they're there, they're there. If they're not, they're not. I mean, it's not something I really mind one way or another, you know?
But they apparently are still guiding you to know,
Yeah.
helping you write this new book.
Uh-huh.
You've got a
Yeah.
mission. You did the awakening thing, that's done. Your teacher. Now you've actually got a mission. You've been called on a mission by these non-human intelligences.
Yeah, and I think that most people who write about these things they're called to do these things, to write these books. Certainly I think William Walker Atkinson was such an individual. He was just a prolific writer. He wrote like 100 books on all of this stuff, Eastern philosophy, how to use it,
Mhm.
how to use your mind, right? And in looking at his books and reading his stuff and trying the things that he says, I've yet to come across anything that is uh not true, even though a lot of that stuff sounds very much out there. Like there's this book he wrote called Practical Psychometry and Crystal Gazing, right? Which is something that you know, I never would have read about that prior to this,
Is that
but
related to the psychomantium?
yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
And if you want to get into that, we can get into that. But the idea of the psychomantium, right, and this central place where like the idea of going back to this Greek idea of initiation. Uh, who was the author? It was Dr. Moody.
Dr. Moody, Raymond Moody. Mhm.
Raymond Moody wrote about this, and he talked about creating like a modern day psychomantium where people could go uh, deceased relatives.
And
Right?
let's be clear what this is. All it is a mirror
Hmm.
in a dark room with a candle. It's
Right.
just a mirror.
Hmm.
And what the
And he
Greeks
had he
did
had
was
like
that,
a black background so that
yeah,
there was nothing else that you could see.
it's a black background. It's a
Yeah.
mirror where you don't see yourself in it. So it's
Hmm.
tilted so you don't see it. And you sit in a chair and you have a candle in the room. So there's a little bit of light. That's what a psychomantium is.
Hmm.
And you stare at it, and then there's a little mist that happens. And then you start to see dead relatives, and they physically will come in the room.
Mm,
And the Greeks, that was basically you go into a cave and they had a pool of water that they put olive oil on top of it. And it was
mm,
just a mirror.
yeah.
All this is a mirror in a dark room with a little bit of light.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so how do you explain that?
It's difficult to explain. I mean, I understand it, certainly. I don't, it's difficult to articulate though. So like, so the Greeks had their psychomanteum, right, in a building, right?
Mhm.
What did they call that building? It was like uh the Oracle of the Dead,
Yes.
right, is what they called it. And it was a physical location and people could go there and have this experience, right? But wait, what happens is you go into this building, it's underground, right? It's the underground, this
Mhm.
idea of the underground going inside, right? And then you go through this maze. There's a maze built into the thing, right?
Right.
So you got to figure it out. And then you come out and you enter the psychomanteum and you have this experience with a deceased loved one. Um, and so it's very much like the journey, right? It's set up as a physical manifestation of the journey.
Yeah.
And so at the end of that, you have a physical experience of something, right? Because this is obviously a physical manifestation of that. And so you may have a deceased loved one that comes through, or something like that. But because it's in keeping with the idea of truth, right? The idea that you enter this underground, you go through this change, you go through this maze, and you figure it out. Um, it's like as above, so below, right? So
Right.
just as you're doing this on the mental plane in terms of initiation, there's a physical manifestation of this in a building, right? As above, so below. And so it works. Um, because because as above so below is a truth about the universe, and
In
so I
in so many different ways.
yeah.
It's the north south pole. It's the two sides of the archetypes you talk about, the shadow
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
non-shadow, the light and the dark.
Hmm.
It's duality basically, right?
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
what you could call it.
Yeah, you could think of it that way, yeah.
And it's conscious and you're unconscious.
Hmm. Yeah. And I that's not something that I ever would have thought possible, but really, like Dr. Moody talks about how, there's some extraordinary number of people, a percentage of people who after the death of a loved one will have a dream where that loved one appears to them and maybe says something or relays some message or
Hmm.
something, but but today we tell people who experience that, oh well, that's just, you wanted that, so that's what you saw,
Right. You're just
right?
processing their death.
Yeah, and that's all that is,
Do
but
you feel like
it's,
it's really them?
I
It's
know
really
it's
that
that.
it's the deceased consciousness actually
Oh
coming
yeah.
back.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you'd have, I mean, the people would have to read my book, but one of the things I talk about is that if somebody who's like a deceased loved one, for instance, can tell you something in a dream that you aren't aware of, something in the dream, and then you can go and wake up in the morning and Google that, and you're like, oh, that's a thing that really exists, you know? Um, And so, what do you think that is, right? How else do you explain that experience?
Precognition.
If it's not them from the other side, then what exactly is going on there that they were able to relay a piece of information to you that you had no awareness of, and then you wake up and Google that, and there it is. If you understand what the universe is, there's only one thing.
It's
There's
the
only one,
universe. Uni means
right?
one.
There's only one thing that exists, and that's it. Everything that you see, yourself and uh it's all one thing. And
Consciousness.
so, right, and so you can't have So if you want to say that your deceased loved one is yourself coming back from the future to tell you something, well, technically, I guess that's correct, right? I mean, so that's what I'm getting at here. Like, I think that people are, we're talking about the same thing basically at the end of the day. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. It totally makes
Right.
sense. I want to change the subject real quick. We're almost 3 hours into this. I'm loving every minute of it. Probably no one else is, but I'm enjoying this. We're recording it. What the hell?
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about full disclosure.
Yeah.
Let's go right back to you and you and the gimbal and
Hmm.
it coming out. This seems like the non-human intelligences are in control of what's going on. Humans are not in control of it. The way I see it is it's a global psychosis that it's going to
Hmm.
push at some point everyone's going to figure out that this is real. We're
Yeah.
still in the minority. Us experiencers, what is it, 5-10% of the population that's been experienced the paranormal
Hmm.
like us?
Hmm.
But at some point it's going to be 100%, close
Yeah.
to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't
Because
that what full disclosure is about? Is basically everyone starts going, "Oh my God, this is real."
yeah, I mean, if you want to understand what the evolution of humans looks like going forward,
Yeah.
you only have to look at them to figure that out, right? And then you'll understand where we're going. Um, but of course, to understand where we're going, you have to have an understanding that this stuff is real,
Well,
which,
that's where it starts. Is you go, "Oh my
yeah.
gosh, this is actually real," and something snaps. There's a pop. Some people actually
Hmm.
hear a crack in their minds or a crackling
Yeah.
or electronic buzzing. There's some kind of physical, some people taste metallic
Hmm.
or they smell sulfur,
Hmm.
something, or the bright light. I mean, there's, all kinds of different bodily sensations when they realize it's real,
Hmm.
that there are non-human intelligences, that near-death experiences are real.
Hmm.
And they're directing this, they're driving us towards that, like sheep off a cliff.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of materialists will say, well, why don't they just land on the White
White
House
House
lawn
lawn.
if they want us to know that they're here? And my response to that is that that's antithetical to what they're trying to accomplish because this is an inward journey, right?
It's
So
it's here. It's one-on-one.
right, you're supposed to go within to find the answers to this, not so for them to call attention to the outside physical world, um, is kind of not what they want to do. They do want to do that initially,
Like
right? Because
places like Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, they're showing up on Skinwalker Ranch,
yeah, and that is to let you know that it's real,
and to have that
right?
initiation, or they
And,
they do the
and so
gimbal,
so then when you start to have experiences, you're like, I know what this is. This is that,
right?
right? And you kind of start to put it together. But there are people who are so hard science that they will, even if they start to have experiences, they will never believe that,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Well, Mick West,
Yeah.
at some point, he said that he was scared by a craft when he was a kid. I
Hmm.
think he said that publicly. And Stephen Greenstreet, who's a pseudo skeptic, he really bashes people. He saw a boomerang UAP over his head in Utah, and
Hmm.
he's done 2 videos on it.
Yeah.
And yet he says that it's all bullshit. It's just this cult. It's a religion. So, how, what's going on there?
It's just a matter of how extroverted are you, right? And there are people who, no matter what, will hang on to that extroversion. They will hang on to it even if it kills them. They'll hang on to it, and they will not let it go. And that's when um, you find yourself a failed initiate, right? Which is I see it a lot. And it's very unfortunate. It really is because these people they end up being uh much more broken and less whole than they were going into it. It really messes them up, because they are just holding on and not letting go. And I have this quote in my book from the movie Jacob's Ladder.
Hmm.
I think we talked about that at one point, where if you're afraid of death and you're still holding on, then you see devils tearing your life away. But when you give up and you give into it, then the angels are really, they're really angels that are freeing you from the earth and physicality. Uh,
That
and
gives me chills, because
yeah,
what you're talking about is, if you're trying to hold on to life and fighting death,
mhm.
then that's absolute, it's hell.
Yeah, it
And
is.
you're being dismembered, or you're being
Right.
burned. It's that
Mhm.
fire, the refiner's fire, and
Yeah,
it's demonic. And then as soon as you let go, you see that they're angels, and they're
right.
purifying you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I opened my book with the Homeric hymn to the goddess Demeter, right, where she's described as, she's going to turn this boy into an immortal god, and to repay this family for their kindness towards her that this boy is from. So she's like, I'm going to repay this family and turn their youngest boy into an immortal god. And so, she's doing this great thing. She places him into a fire to burn like a log every night, right? Because that's how you do this, to burn away the mortal soul. And so she's doing this, and the mother sees her doing this one day and screams, right? And it's like, oh my God, what are you doing, you crazy lady? You're burning my son in a fire. And so she pulls him out and she lays him on the ground. And at this point, she's disguised, right? Everybody thinks she's this old woman who's just caring for this boy, and is just a servant in the household. But she, rips off her disguise. And this is another light show incident where it says she rips off her disguise and she reveals herself as the goddess Demeter in all of her glory. And her divine light shoots through the palace like a bolt of lightning,
Yeah.
lighting up the entire palace. Um, and uh, and so that's what people do. They shriek, and they won't do it, and they think it's bad, And so Demeter chides this woman and says, you're just a silly mortal. Stop behaving like a silly mortal. You can't tell the difference between good fortune and bad. I would have turned this boy into an immortal god, but now you've interrupted that process in your childish behavior. And now he's only going to be immortal for a short time. And so but that was the myth that was central to the Eleusinian mysteries, which I kind of equate with the experience that I went through.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It was all burned away. Your sin, or whatever you want to
yeah,
call it, was burned away.
right. And through this just painful, incredibly painful process, this depression, um, you know, uh, and even at Eleusis, they've unearthed, iconography and things like that of Demeter and Persephone, her daughter Persephone, like with torches holding them to an initiate, like burning them.
Barbecuing them.
Yeah. Um, and so it's like, they're just describing the initiatory process in that kind of art. But a lot of those things were smashed. And so
Yeah.
and actually the ending of the Homeric hymn was not known until very recently, because it had always, if it was on stone, it would have been chipped away, uh, and erased from the record, or torn out of a book. It was just not something that people knew. But I talk about that in my book, and I give the ending of that hymn, and it talks about how, to he who doesn't partake in these things in life will not in death receive the things that initiates do, and things like that. So, um,
And if we don't make it, we die, and we start over again.
yeah, there's
Right?
there's no There's no dwelling with the gods afterwards.
Yeah, this is all about becoming a god, isn't it?
Yeah, little g. Yeah.
Yeah, little g, little g. Where do you see us? Where do you see us as a society? Where are we headed, in your opinion?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't. So here's the thing: is that in order to start this process or kick it off in people, you have to go through something that would not be quote unquote good, right? It's going to be something that's going to hit you in the face like a shovel. So
Horrific,
yeah.
horrific, off the scale, horrific.
So yeah, I mean, so you may experience something that is very difficult. So if I had to say, if I mean, and first of all, not everyone's going to get there. I mean, there's no way. I look at society and I see how extroverted people are. Even Jung, he said, the United States is extroverted as hell, right? Um, so I mean, the only way to kickstart that would be to something shocking has to happen. Um, and even if it does, something shocking does happen, it's only going to happen in handfuls of people, respective to the population. It's not going to be everyone.
And then we're going to ultimately make it through it, right?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. Every one of us will go through that. I mean, we don't have a choice. That's just what's going to happen. Um, and so we might as well just go ahead and be honest about that now and truthful about it now and talk about it now so that it's easier, right? Hopefully.
I'll tell you, reading your book has been phenomenal for me. I read it 2 weeks ago, and it's just aligned so many things in my life. The biggest message I got out of it is to be true to myself.
Hmm.
And that sometimes can be the hardest thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, people will lie to themselves about anything and everything they can, to get away with these shadows in their life.
And avoid the pain.
Yeah. And avoid taking any kind of accountability for their own thoughts and actions. Because if you are, as I say, if you're going to be a creator, right, and someone who can create with the mind, then that mind has to be incredibly well manicured and looked after, so that it doesn't stray from anything that isn't aligned with creativity, right? Because it would be too easy to just destroy everything with a thought if you get frustrated at it. Um, and and that obviously would not be good. So you have
Yeah.
to be very disciplined,
Basically, don't lose your shit
very forgiving. Yeah. Hmm.
and face your fears.
Hmm.
Don't be fear-based.
Right.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to your new book.
Yeah. I'm working on it. I don't know when it's going to be out. It's very difficult to do because just like with initiated, I want to make it very simple. There's a lot of philosophers out there and people who they like to use $10 words. I want a sixth grader to be able to pick up my book and understand it. So I'm trying to describe these very complex psychological ideas, and I'm trying to explain them in simple terms and use mythology. Someone described initiated as a mythopoetic approach to alien intrusion. It's uh, um, one of my the reviews of one of my books is titled that. So, and I've always loved that. So
That's beautiful. It
I
is.
always
It's
kind of
beautiful.
take this mythopoetic approach to all of my writing, but also to keep it simple so that you don't have to sit there with a dictionary.
Right.
If you're not somebody that reads on a regular basis, you don't have to sit there with a dictionary and what is this guy saying? Because not only are these ideas complex, but if you use complex language too, it just really turns people off. And I
Yeah.
want it to be very easy, very simple, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, it's going to reach the right people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I hope I can contribute to that as much as I can by doing this podcast. If people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you?
I'm on Twitter. You know, you can message me on Twitter or leave a message in one of my posts, and I'll probably see it at some point. I may not get back to you right away. I've got my email address listed on my Facebook page, so you can look me up there. I'm very accessible. I have people contact me all the time, so and I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all.
Okay, great. So you'll help people.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
fantastic.
Mhm.
Great. We're going to wrap it up here. Is there any last thing you'd like to say? Any last message you'd like to give as a last thought for people?
Um, just that probably just to go into 2024 with an open mind. That's what I would say. Um, and I think that if you're an experiencer and you're talking to someone who maybe doesn't believe any of this, just tell them that, 2024 is going to be a year to keep an open mind for sure, I think.
Okay, great. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I was great. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Okay, great.
Thanks.